Good morning. It is 6:30 and it is Wednesday, January 22nd, 2020. That's right, January 22nd, 2020, and it is 26 degrees. Not as cold as yesterday, getting up to 40 today, but it will be sunny. Temperature leveling out at about 38 degrees, and we'll be back with the weather momentarily. You're listening to Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone. This is Radio Westchester, the train station, rather the radio station at the train station. They're almost interchangeable at this point. You can listen on RadioWestchester.com. You can go to MyTuner Radio, download the app, and switch it right on. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Periscope, and a few other outlets, lest I forget. Let's get to the top stories today. Well, okay, we're in New York. Derek Jeter's in the Hall of Fame. He got all but one vote. Try and figure that out. Polls show declining support of New York's new bail reform law. We'll see if that takes any effect. And the MTA police report today a Metro North train slammed into a tractor trailer up in Sloatsburg. A person arrested following a fatal stabbing in Middletown. And, of course, the impeachment got rolling yesterday, both sides getting at each other so much, believe it or not, that the Supreme Court Justice, Mr. Roberts, or rather Justice Roberts, had to tell him to knock it off. Welcome to Radio Westchester. Let's get to the weather first. And the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. Let's get to it. 26 degrees. Going to get up to 40 today, but we're really talking 38 most of the day. Nicer than yesterday, and so long as the wind doesn't blow, it won't be too cold. Tonight, a few clouds, the temperature 22, so keep your blankets around. Thursday, a mix of sun and clouds, the temperature 44. The wind will be out of the southwest 5 to 10 miles an hour. And Friday, mostly cloudy, the high 45 as it warms up. It's Saturday, and we'll go there now. Windy with a wintry mix of rain, snow, and sleet. But don't look for lots of snow because we're getting up to 42 degrees. And as we get into the news this morning, the bottom of the hour is brought to you by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, the top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.com. Aging Issues Management and their partner, Aging Issues Radio. They'll be doing another show tonight at 6 o'clock. The law firm of Pena and Con, Dominic's Fine Cigars, and plug-in virtual reality. Let's get to the local news. A new Siena College poll shows declining support for New York State's new bail reform law. This is the second poll Siena has taken about the law, and the new numbers show declining support for the new bill. Yeah, think the new law eliminates cash bail for most misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies, and went into effect this year. It found 49% of voters believe the change is bad for New York. 37% feel it is good. It was a big change from last year's poll where 55% felt the law would be a positive change and only 38 thought it would be bad. As you know, and we've been talking about it pretty regularly here on Radio Westchester, the fact is that most people are beginning, at least anecdotally, to move against the law such as it is constructed. They don't want a major reform, but they do want, it seems to us here, judges to have some discretion. And by way of commentary, this may well be the beginning of reversals for the Democratic Party here in New York and perhaps elsewhere in the country if they keep up this kind of agenda-driven. It's not nonsense. The bill made sense, but not as it was enacted. A Metro North train slammed into a tractor trailer in the village of Sloatsburg Tuesday evening. MTA police say the crash happened off the Orange Turnpike near Washington Avenue and happened around 6 o'clock and reported in News 12 here. Witnesses told the station they tried to get the driver out as the train was approaching, but he refused and stayed in the cab. The driver of the truck and all 375 passengers aboard the train were not injured. Passengers aboard were left shaken. It was a lot of thumps. Nobody screamed. Nobody panicked. But everybody looked up as if to say, oh my God, we just hit something. Now, why the individual didn't get out of the cab will be, no harm, no foul, I guess, but will be a subject of some discussion. One person was arrested after a fatal stabbing in Middletown. This on Tuesday as well. And out of News 12 this morning, police say it took place at a home on Orchard Street. They say the suspect and victim were arguing when the suspect stabbed him. The victim was taken to a nearby hospital where he was pronounced dead, and the suspect fled. He was eventually caught. The names of both have not yet been released, and we thank News 12 for that story. And we know you've all been waiting for this one. Derek Jeter came within one vote of being a unanimous pick for the Hall of Fame, while Larry Walker also earned baseball's highest honor on Tuesday. After all we went through yesterday, handicapping all the choices, the most and least likely were elected, just one of those things. The longtime New York Yankees captain, however, appeared on 396 of 397 ballots cast by the Baseball Writers Association of America, falling just one shy of the standard set when Yankees teammate Mariano Rivera became the first unanimous selection last year. Jeter's 99.7% moved above Ken Griffey, who had 99.3% for the second highest. Jeter said, and I quote, "I was speechless when I got the call. Quite frankly, I was pretty nervous, and when I got it, I really didn't know what to say." Well, congratulations, well earned, and people will be talking all day. Who was the one person that didn't vote? My God, only one player, period, ever got a unanimous vote. People should just get over it. A Somers High School graduate found dead in California was laid to rest on Tuesday morning. The wake was held for 29-year-old Ashley Manning. Anaheim police, this is where it happened, say her body was found earlier this month in the back of an abandoned truck. Her death is being treated as suspicious. Manning graduated from Somers High School in 2008 before moving to the West Coast, and officials are waiting for toxicology reports. You know, we do a lot of talking these days here, particularly in New Rochelle, about development and about rentals. Well, this is something that the real estate folks are telling us now, and this out of Lohud today. The year 2019, they say, was a high point for rental development across Westchester County, especially along the Hudson. National, regional, and local developers began placing bets on residential development as far south as the city of Yonkers and as north as Haverstraw in Rockland. And while that is not to say that the years ahead will be quiet along the Long Island Sound and in central Westchester, it is likely to hear more milestones for Riverside development. And it was the municipal administrators in Westchester who showed willingness to work with developers, also found new sources of capital in 2019. Again, the banks, and the point here, was willing to work with them. Just some notes, single-family home sales in Rockland grew by 5.5% in 2019 on a year-over-year basis, while sales in Westchester declined by 0.8%. Development along the train stations, and that's what we've seen here in New Rochelle, fronting the Hudson and in other places. White Plains, for example, will continue to add rental units, so say the professionals, through 2020. So, wow. All righty, we hate that we have to bring one of these stories up again, but we must. 3 new victims are coming forward with allegations of sex abuse against the Catholic priest who previously pleaded guilty to forming a sex club and molesting dozens of children. This came out of News 12 this morning. Convicted child molester Father Edward Papala is once again at the center of a child sex abuse scandal. And this says an attorney for one of the victims. For decades, he was given license and permission by the Archdiocese and top officials to continue one of the most predatory paths we have seen. Before his death, Father Papilla admitted to sexually molesting 50 children, some of them in a secret sex club he formed while serving at Sacred Heart Church in Monroe. And one attorney said, and we quote them, not us now, if he admits to 50, that means there were hundreds out there. At the time, Papala, who was then a priest at St. John's in Goshen, claimed the Archdiocese knew about his misconduct for decades. It is 6:44, and if you're just joining us, it's cold, but not as cold as yesterday. It's 26 degrees. It will get up to 40 today. You're listening to Radio Westchester. This is Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am he. We are the radio station at the train station. Again, it's cold, but it could be worse. So let's take a look at what we'll be doing today. We're going to open up the phones in a few minutes and talk about the impeachment process or not. Vince Russo's coming on at 7:20. At 7:35, Harlan Ullman, he's joining us early today because of other commitments. We'll get his take on the impeachment and see what's going on in the rest of the planet. I have invited, we've got a couple of calls and stuff yesterday. Can we get someone who, a caller or a guest who is pro-Trump, or at least shows that side of the story? And I've asked Anthony to come on, see if he'll call us at 8 o'clock. We've not got a confirm yet because we were doing show prep late last night. Al Tarantino, your city councilman from District 2 here in New Rochelle, will join us at 8:20, and at 8:35, A.J. Woodson from Black Westchester Magazine. Now, obviously, the impeachment kind of degenerated last night in ways that we would have expected. The Democrats calling what the Republicans were doing a cover-up, and the Republicans calling what the Democrats were doing unnecessary, that no crime was committed. And of course, both sides go back and forth, and the issue of what is a crime, what is not a crime, which is irrelevant to impeachment, but also whether or not a high crime or misdemeanor is really the issue. So I'm looking at what one of our people did yesterday with a wire, how they put it in. Sorry about that. Anyway, I digress. So not a lot really was accomplished, except the fact that right now, at least so far, even with the appeals by the Democrats, there will not be, at least at this point, witnesses, and there will not be evidence presented, just points of view. But that's so far. It's still early in the game. One of the things that did change so far is that rather than 2 days of if you will, we can't call it testimony if there's no witnesses, but presentations. We shall have 3 days from the Congress and 3 days from the Senate, and that is pro those that believe the president should be removed from office and those that believe he shouldn't even be impeached. Although that's too late, that ship has sailed. It is a matter of history now, and as much as it may rub people the wrong way, this president has been impeached. It just means indicted. It doesn't mean convicted. But that stain don't wash away. Now, some of the other items in the news this morning, and they are troubling to say the least. There's this killer, well, this one thing is killer Chinese virus comes to the U.S. First patient reported in Washington State, so says the CDC. But as I said yesterday, and I'm not at liberty to get into details, I know of a suspected case here in Queens. It is not yet confirmed, but we have and expect that there will be cases in New York because this is an international city. And we have airports, Kennedy Airport, of course, over in LaGuardia, less so international travel, but we have an international airport over in Newark as well. So, and certainly many of the private airports, such as Westchester County, send executives overseas. So they're looking at some sort of a vaccine already to see if any of the existing vaccines will work. But what is known about this coronavirus, it was an animal virus, and it went from animal to animal, but now somehow it has gone from animal to humans. Most of the cases are in China. In fact, 99% of them are right now, only a couple of hundred. But because it's so new and so rare, people are concerned. But they are saying that China's really stepped up its game in terms of dealing with it. Now, another note about this, one Jeremy Farrar, a renowned specialist in infectious diseases, said the virus in China isn't new. But again, it adapted after decades and decades in only animals. Again, should you be worried? The World Health Organization will determine if the virus outbreak is a global health emergency. They haven't declared it thus, so we shall see. Missouri lawmakers are sparring over how to handle a spike in violence there. One pitching a tough-on-crime bill Tuesday directed blame for a surge in violence in the state's biggest cities at factors including the sometimes violent protests in Ferguson and St. Louis. That just for example. Now get this. Men and women who stray, this is for you. A Texas woman tased her husband after catching him with a girlfriend. A furious Texas wife who caught her husband partying with another woman at a nightclub decided to tase him. Baseball Hall of Famer Barry Bonds, by the way, we already knew this, has eluded election to the Hall of Fame as Roger Clemens did. Now, we'd like to open up the phones about this. Yesterday, when we talked about this, we here in the studio, and those of you who comment, in fact, last night, Tom from Pelham was all upset, and I sort of don't disagree with him, rather, that Mr. Walker was in the Hall of Fame. But only two guys went in, Jeter and Walker, all the other names that we handicapped. Sorry, guys. See you next time. Just strange. I guess it's good that they're selective, but Walker was at the other end of the spectrum. I guess because it was his last time, 10th year on the ballot, I guess they felt that they should finally get that one done. So the phones are open, 914-222-3141. We'll take your calls on any number of different things. We'd love to talk about Jeter in the Hall of Fame, but we'd also love to talk about this new bail law and, of course, your feelings as early as it is now on the impeachment trial. Again, your feelings. I'm not going to engage in a big debate about it. I have my feelings, but I'd like to wait and see what the trial shows. But my largest concern is a trial is a trial is a trial. They should set the rules. They should follow whatever the rules are. But please, if you're going to call to tell me it doesn't happen, I won't make any comment. I will let you sit and stew with the fact that nothing happened as a quote. But you can say it's not proved. You can say it's not impeachable. You can say to me that it is does not warrant removal from office. I'll even agree with you. But please, don't tell me it didn't happen. The TSA has found a record number of guns at airports in 2019, and they say that it's deeply troubling. Well, why wouldn't we have a number of guns at our airports? We have more guns now in this country than we have people. So think about that. Now, for those of you who believe that the Los Angeles Dodgers should give up their titles, or rather the Astros should give up their titles as well as the Sox to the Dodgers, well, the Los Angeles City Council is indeed doing that. They're urging Major League Baseball to strip the Astros and Red Sox of their titles despite sign-stealing accusations, and they want the league to, and the quote here is, rewrite history. General, look, I can't buy this. This is something that's just not going to work for a long time until we get drivers with brains off the roads. But now GM is unveiling a fully driverless vehicle. The vehicle will be a taller but not much longer than GM's Bolt electric vehicle. Vehicle would not have any steering wheel or either manual controls. You know what this is really? What we really need are just little single cab trains, because that's what it's going to evolve to be. We cannot have driverless vehicles out there, at least as far as I can see, so long as we have drivers. For example, there are people on the road night now on their way to work out on the Jersey Turnpike up on 87 that are driving 75 or 80, and they're driving that way because in the middle of the night where the good drivers drive, not the drunks, but the truckers, the newscasters, the police officers, and the firemen and women, etc., who are professionals, they're driving safely at that speed. So if we have a car, unless everybody else is driving the speed limit, if we have a car that only drives the speed limit, well, it won't fit in. Similarly, left turns. No one does the left turn properly anymore because no one trusts the other guy to do it. So if we program a car to make a left turn before the oncoming traffic, after the oncoming traffic, as we were all taught, they will get into crashes, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just a couple. We're talking about scores of problems like this. So it will be some time. Let's also touch briefly, and we'll talk with Vince Russo about this at 7:20 when he comes on. The day after a massive gathering of gun rights activists at the Virginia Capitol, the state Senate on Tuesday there advanced legislation that would allow authorities to take guns away from people deemed dangerous to themselves or others. Now, that makes total sense, at least to me. And a little bit more about that story as we come up now on 654. And this was the aftermath of it. Thousands of gun rights activists did rally, and as Vince said yesterday, they rallied peacefully in the Virginia Capitol in protest of firearm control legislation proposed by the state's Democratic leadership. Under the watch of a heavy police presence and amid a state of emergency declared by the governor, throngs of gun enthusiasts assembled at the Capitol building in Richmond to exercise their right. Protesters looked to enter the Capitol grounds, had to leave their guns at home, and endure an hours-long wait in withering cold at the security checkpoint. But there were no restrictions off the Capitol grounds, and demonstrators marched openly there, bearing guns, including assault rifles, while decked out in camouflage. Those are the knuckleheads, by the way. You can't get everybody just screaming about the Second Amendment. The knuckleheads wearing bringing their giant rifles, wearing camouflage, wearing bulletproof vests and military-style helmets during the tense, but ultimately peaceful demonstration. Now, the reason I mention that is to be fair to gun enthusiasts everywhere, particularly Vince, who's taught me a lot about responsible gun ownership. And just as a news person, I felt that I owed it to listeners to do my homework. So I went to the NRA and I took their course. And I must tell you, the course was excellent. Excellent. Safety, the order of the day. How to handle a gun, the order of the day. And safety again, and then safety a third and fourth and fifth times. I even have a certificate showing that I took the NRA course. I was very impressed with it. And the worst thing about it was putting bullets in clips. You better have thumbs made of horsehide because they will ache trying to push them into the spring load in those things. But anyway, I digress. We who were taking the course, and people from all walks of life, everyone responsible who participated, and certainly the instructors were terrific. As the day wore on and we were getting ready to end our course, there were police officers and other professionals who came by and other gun owners who came by and did their target shooting. Towards the end of the day, however, it got a little spooky. But look, so long as it's legal and so long as they follow the laws, I have no issue with it. Well, I do have a personal issue with it, but it's just a personal issue. It doesn't mean a hill of beans. But then the wackos started to show up. They had Jeeps. They had Hummers. But again, this is like someone with having jet stickers all over their car. I realize that it's their hobby. They had holsters. They had bullet vests. They had rifles the size of Christmas trees. More sadly, too many of them had small children dressed in camouflage with small assault weapons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they were real yahoos. But again, this is America. You're entitled to be, and the Second Amendment says it's okay, so long as they're being responsible. But there is this odd thread about it that just gave pause for one to wonder. It is 6:58. We have one more story before we go to the top of the hour. And that is the story with which we led. We can, as a responsible public, and myself and others who do what I do, who are commentators, cannot let this slide, particularly those of us, and especially those of us who have skewed left in a lot of these areas. If we don't call out the left for its excesses, then maybe we shouldn't be yelling about the right for their excesses or to the right. The bail law is failing in its execution. It is like many things, you can't use a broad brush to paint things that are complex. It just doesn't work. And so we can't go backwards either. We can't allow someone who gets arrested because they're accused of a robbery that is small time, or they're accused of another incident where they're not considered dangerous or a repeat offender, and leave them in jail for 6 months while they await trial because they can't afford bail. I get that. But on the other hand, when we have people who a judge would deem dangerous, who a judge would deem a true flight risk, who a judge would deem perhaps mentally unfit, we cannot have those people out on the streets. And if and this is just my own prediction, because we've seen it happen with the Tea Party, although in many ways they prevailed because Trump got elected and with his views, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I won't have to repeat the et ceteras or the details that back up those et ceteras. The Democratic Party is close, on the precipice of my own view, of pushing itself into irrelevance by its extremism. And we see all the signs of it, where anyone who's not extremely to the left now is going to get primaried, as we see the fracturing of the Democratic Party. And what they're going to do is they're going to push people of goodwill, hardworking, tax-paying people who are slowly getting fed up themselves. They're going to push them over to the right of that center line. And it will be just if it happens. The Democratic Party needs to get hold of itself, and if it cannot, maybe what this country needs, and I know I've spent a lot of time talking with people at the SAM Party, but it just doesn't get traction. We need radicals who are centrists. If that's a paradox, maybe it is, but they need to be radical, and they need to be boisterous, and they need to be assertive in their hope for moderation. Our bodies are classic cases of what's called stasis or equilibrium. We're losing it in our politics. We see it now in Washington, and this bail law is such an example. And again, we've got to talk to Andrea Stewart Cousins, and again, we will reach out to her. We're not going to waste the time reaching out to Heastie. He wants to come on, he's welcome to. But his position that he sees nothing wrong with the bail law is totally equivalent to the president saying it was a perfect phone call. This kind of black and white, stark denial of reality, people of goodwill everywhere need to reject it, and they need to reject it with the greatest amount of vigor that is possible. Oh, one more item, too. I cut this out the other day from Jonathan Tobin, and he said, Vax quacks win in New Jersey, and they did. The New Jersey politicians, and we'll be talking with one in a little while, I'd like to think him separate from this, but never really fond of having backbones, have allowed the knuckleheads there, the anti-vaxxers, to win and say, no, don't worry. Yes, okay, for religious reasons, you don't have to vaccinate your kid. Baloney. They're putting the rest of you and all of us at risk. And I am going to throw another story in that's sticking in my craw today. I can't believe I read this, but I did. And it is a story in the Daily News about a left-leaning politician. This is why the country is at odds, and anyone who doesn't have trouble with this needs to rethink what it is to be an American. And this is the left doing everything that they accuse the right of doing. And this is the Brooklyn Borough President, Eric Adams. He has a dream of leading a New York City that is home to far fewer Midwesterners. How dare he? Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, the leading fundraiser in 2021 mayoral race, used Martin Luther King Jr.'s national holiday to deliver an inflammatory broadside against newcomers. In short, he doesn't want them coming to live in Brooklyn. Go back where you're from. This left-leaning elected official is now obviously a member of the same group that gets upset when President Trump tells people to go back from where they came. And here he's telling American citizens to go back. What is happening to the left? Now, I understand the consequence of gentrification. I do. But this is a free society and a free market society. We need to solve the problem, not deal in absolutes. Someone gets a job here in New York and from Iowa, and they come here and they want to live in Brooklyn because they love the life, and you're telling them to go home. So that I guess if someone here gets a job in Iowa or Ohio, or they become a new schools chancellor in Ohio, or they become a doctor in Ohio, that Ohio should send them back. You know, I love Brooklyn. I grew up there. And this Brooklyn Beep, and here's another, here I am, someone who used to skew left, still do in many ways, for separation of church and state, women's right to choose, you name it, a progressive when it comes to the civil rights movement. But this is not the answer. And one of the things I'm noticing in the civil rights movement, and I don't know how we stop it, is when we finally started growing as a country, and we finally had a black president, whom I voted for, when we finally have progress in that area, and we need more progress, absolutely we do, it isn't the time to get even. It isn't the time to use the same tools against white people or against society that they used against blacks and Indians and everybody else when we were showing the worst angels of our nature. It's not time to get even. It should be a time to come together. So for those of you who still live in Brooklyn, who are my friends and lovers and everything else and family, please vote this guy out of office. Do it yesterday. Eric Adams. It is 7:05. We have to go back to a reset, and then we'll take your calls and talk to Vince Russo. Good morning. But I got all that off my chest. There's so much more in the news. I could moan and just unbelievable. All right, but I'm not going to. I'm going to try to be upbeat, if that is possible in this day and age. Good morning. It is 7:06. It's 26 degrees, going to get up to about 40 today, but then it'll just peak and drop down to 38 and average out. It is Wednesday, January 22nd of 2020. Can you believe it? This is Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone, and as you can tell, it's lonely here in the middle. At any rate, Mornings with Bob Marrone, I am he. This is Radio Westchester. We are the radio station at the train station, and one of the reasons we went out on our own is so that we could speak our mind, and that so can you too. So the phones are open right now at 222-3141 if you want to join this conversation. We will be talking with Vince Russo in just a few moments about some of these issues. But first, we need to take a look at the weather. And the weather, as you know, is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. And it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And we do go to that weather now. 26 degrees. Going to average out about 38 today. Again, it will get up to 40. The good news, it'll be sunny. The temperature, again, 38. The wind out of the west-northwest, 5 to 10. Warmer than yesterday. Not perfect, but we'll take it, and we'll love the sun. Tonight, a few clouds. We'll get down to 22. You'll still need those blankets. Tomorrow, Thursday, a mix of sun and clouds, getting up to 44. Friday, mostly cloudy, a high of 45 as it warms up. Even the overnight, only 33, but still over freezing. Saturday, are we going to have a big snowstorm? No. Windy, though, with a wintry mix of rain, snow, and sleet, but getting up to 42, a low of 35. No snow will stick. And this top of the hour is brought to you by Aging Issues Management and their partners, Aging Issues Radio. They'll be with you tonight at 6 o'clock, that Aging Issues Management program dealing with the issues of aging and the financial consequences of that. The law firm of Payne & Con and Plug-in Virtual Reality. And don't forget Dominic's Fine Cigars, licensed retailer with a big selection including Arturo Fuente, Patrons, and more. Dominic's Fine Cigars, located on Boston Post Road in Larchmont. They're open 7 days, and they will bring you. We will be doing a remote in 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks now. We will do our show from Dominic's Fine Cigars in lieu of and in preparation for, not in lieu of, I shouldn't say, but in preparation and acknowledgement of the Super Bowl. And of course, we'll have Jake's Picks. He's home now studying tables, dealing with priests, rabbis, gurus, seance experts, mediums, so that he can set a proper pick for the Super Bowl. Welcome once again to the 7 o'clock hour now of Radio Westchester. Vince Russo's coming up in a few minutes. Harlan Ullman after that. We'll talk with Anthony if he got our messages late last night. We hope he did. We want to hear the frame of reference from someone who feels the president's getting a raw deal, or at least wants it to be fair towards the president. After that, Al Tarantino will be with us at 8:20, District 2 City Councilman here in New Rochelle, and then, of course, A.J. Woodson. We have a lot to talk about with him. And I imagine that for listeners of this program, you're probably trying, and because this is what people do, we try and identify the spots on a leopard or the attitudes. And is he on the right, this Bob Marrone? Is he on the left? Where is he? Well, I float back and forth in the middle depending on the issues. And the one consistency is that I love this experiment that is America. I love the fact that we have a slow-moving but democratic society. Now, I did come upon something yesterday, and it's something we need to respect, and it's why I am one of those people that does not want the president removed from office during this impeachment. The founding fathers wanted it thus that a president would need to do something so egregious that even within partisan politics, his own or her, if there were a woman president, side would need to agree that the president should be removed. But more importantly, what we have is a democracy. Now, for a moment, please dismiss what the Russians did. Did it make a difference? We'll never know. The only thing that ever stuck in my craw is that the president says it didn't happen. Okay, so let's move on from that. But there still is 40%, 35, 40% of this country still wants to vote for the man again. We have a democracy. Now, there is a larger question. Sometimes does democracy get it right? Now, I'm not making the parallel. I'm not saying the president is like Adolf Hitler. That's not the point. I'm talking about a process, a dynamic. But what's very interesting about what happened in Germany in 1933, and then even as they moved into the late 30s, is that it was the democratic will of the people that brought in a strong man. And in their case, after 31 parties, after World War I and its horrible Versailles Treaty and the Great Depression, people were willing to look the other way at an awful lot of stuff to have stability, to have pride, and unfortunately, though, in their case, they had this notion of Volk, of this Aryan master race. Now, we don't have that, thank goodness. But the point is that was democratic. Now, it was interesting because it was a democracy that killed itself. It democratically got rid of democracy by the leaders they chose. So just interesting that. But having said that, I'm about to throw the left under the bus again, and it seems to be the theme of today's show more than usually where we throw the president under the bus, or at least his minions. Louis C.K. went to a slave play, Jeremy O'Hara's slave play this week, and the playwright wasn't thrilled to have him in the house, though we're told the disgraced comic was a perfect gentleman. All right, let's cover this. Our friends on the left, with a great deal of justification, though not total justification, don't want people arrested because they've committed a previous crime, and they don't want that bias, and they want people to be more lenient towards people who've committed crimes, and they want our schools to look the other way on children, and particularly people of color or from other countries, do something they shouldn't do, and to be more lenient and forgiving and a second chance and restorative justice. And I get that. I don't think we do it well, but I get that. But the left has always been for forgiveness and restoration. The left has always been for, let's be, quote, progressive. Let's give people a second chance. Let's correct, not punish. And yet the left, with the woke movement, with the Me Too movement, with the mistake this guy made, and he did, has become so unforgiving. Why is that? Why isn't Louis C.K. entitled to a second chance? What he did was stupid. What he did was obscene. What he did was adolescent. There, I said it. But you're going to say you don't want them at your play in this free country? How come, of all the groups now, why is the left so less interested in free speech? So less interested is the Mr. Abrams in, I want to get his name right, Eric Adams, rather, in Brooklyn. Why are they now becoming so un-American? What's happened to the far left? Or is it the great line that we've known throughout history that unfortunately one form of tyranny is replaced by another? Now, an interesting piece in Talking Points in the Week magazine today, and this is a sticky wicket, but I'm going to go there. The pop star Lizzo is beloved for both her music and her pride in her plus-size body. She's overweight. It's a cute thing, in terms of her. I'm not talking about her looks. I'm talking about the way she carries herself. It's appealing. It's cute. It's fun. And but Boston Magazine is raising an issue because what they're saying is, one guy being very unkind, Julian Michael, says Lizzo is just another overweight woman who should be working on slimming down rather than preaching body positivity. This is an interesting paradox because on one hand, while we want people to accept themselves as they are, should we be promoting, and should's a big word because in a democracy you can do whatever the hell you want. And anyone who's ever been to a shrink knows that shrinks hate the word should because right away it puts guilt over the top of everything. And they'll even say, one of the great quotes is, I don't know from should. But on one hand, should we be telling people it's okay to be unhealthy? It's a very interesting question. I certainly don't know the answer to it, but I thought you find it interesting. And speaking of morality, listen to this. 63% of Americans say that people can be moral without having a belief in God. I believe in that. While 36% think that people must have a belief in God to behave morally, or rather that's their sensibility is that you're supposed to be fearing that you'll burn in hell until you become a Rice Krispie. Speaking also of health, there was a piece in Business Week, Bloomberg Business Week, that says that 5G may be a healthcare problem, that the radio waves, if you will, and the electromagnetism coming from the towers and these devices is so powerful that it could lead to perhaps cancer. We don't know. Now, I've been beating up the left. Let me throw the right under the bus a little bit today, too. President Trump spent 1 out of every 5 days in 2019 at a golf club. Now, my personal view, I don't care because these guys are on the job constantly. It's just unfair to pick on them for that, although you can pick on them for the cost and you can pick on them for their hypocrisy. Since becoming president, he has spent at least 252 days at Trump golf resorts and 333 days at a Trump property. Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin is fighting to withhold a disclosure of the costs of the Trump family's travels until after the November election. And also, last year was the second hottest year on record, and it trailed the hottest blah, blah, blah. We already knew that. Now, let me see. I have another item. I just wanted to get there. I was listening, driving over to what everybody does, and we started doing this too. You notice the first, and we're still wrestling with the proper start time, looking at our stats for this show. But what most radio stations are doing now, and something that we were doing maybe a little ahead of them, is using the time in the 6 o'clock hour to touch all the news points, get it out there, and in depth so that you don't have to keep repeating the news throughout the whole show. We have all news stations to do that. Like the idea. And trying to figure out what the best way and best time to start based on, again, because we're online in so many different places, et cetera, and have so many apps, we're able to track listenership, when you listen and for how long. So that's a good thing. So we're still wrestling with that, and if you have an opinion, we'd like to hear from you on, you can email me at bob@radiowestchester.com. Where was I going with? Oh, yes, I was listening to some young men who were doing a pre-show, and actually even before I left, on one of the stations I shall not name. Interesting stuff, but they were young men. And boy, oh boy, and we're seeing more and more of this. Beat the living daylights out of. Oh, I see a call coming in. Beat the living daylights out of those of us of a certain age. Made fun of people who use AOL, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And age bias is becoming a bigger and bigger problem. Made fun of their parents for having AOL accounts and so forth. Again, the left, right now in the form of millennials. You championed equality, you championed inclusivity, and yet now as your numbers, as you gain power in certain strongholds because of the divisiveness in the country, as the youth who skew left these days gain influence, you're doing the same things that those you criticized, that you believe they did to you. Let's see who's on the telephone. Good morning. You're on Radio Westchester.
Good morning, Bob. It's Vince.
Hey, Vince. I thought it was you. I'm sorry. I couldn't tell from my screen. I'm glad you're with me at 7:20. As you can tell, I spent a good deal of the morning, even though when it comes to the impeachment, so far I think that the Democrats ought to be able to hear witnesses. But that aside, I've been throwing the left under the bus, and I'll tell you why. A long time ago, when I was studying political science and you were a political wonk, you once said to me before I even studied it, one form of tyranny is always replaced by another. And we're seeing that in this country today by the left. And it is. Did you see this story out of Brooklyn? Are you aware of it?
No, but I heard your monologue about it.
Can you believe it? Can you believe this guy is saying these
Yes,
people should go back?
Actually, I can. Yeah. It's because, frankly, they don't want white people anymore in there.
Say more.
Well, I mean, they're always saying that white people are the problem these days, and so the Midwest is supposedly all white. So why have people from the Midwest come into Brooklyn? And this whole business about gentrification and all of this. Yeah, I mean, people move into areas that are run down. They build them up. They create different environments with the housing and stuff like that. And, of course, things get more expensive. I mean, it's natural because they're making the place better and it attracts more people. It's a natural outcome. But, it really goes to the whole way the left is being run these days. I was looking at a story just now about your pal, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
My pal? Oh, really? Go ahead. All right, continue. Go ahead. Well, she is attractive, which shows my greatest hypocrisy, but go ahead.
And she says here, we don't have a left party in the United States. The Democrat Party is not a left party.
Go ahead. You having trouble reading? Did your phone die? His phone died. Yeah, we'll call him back.
No, it didn't.
Oh, well, you weren't saying anything.
I was saying
Well, then I didn't hear you. Say it again.
So don't blame my phone.
Oh, I'm blaming your phone anyway. White devil.
All right.
Go ahead.
So she says that the Democrat Party is not a left party. The Democrat Party is a center or center conservative party. Now, here's how this woman thinks. She says, we can't even get a floor vote on Medicare for all. Not even a floor vote that gets voted down. We can't get a vote on it. This is not a left party. Now, does she understand that the way these bills come to the floor is by the conferences agreeing on what's going to be put out?
Well, she's doing the same thing the Tea Party did, Vin, when we had 7-8 years ago. Same exact dynamic. We can't even get bills to the floor because of the leadership.
Yeah. Now, I mean, when that whole thing with Amazon was happening in Queens, she was railing against it. Amazon is the devil, blah, blah, blah. And at one point she says, well, why can't New York give the $25 billion they were going to give to Amazon, give it to poor people? Does she not understand the concept of tax breaks, that there was no $25 million being transferred between New York and Amazon. I mean, she keeps saying all of these stupid things. She compared the gun rights rally in Virginia, where one person was arrested, and that one person was arrested because they had passed a resolution that said you cannot cover your face during the protest. And one woman had something in front of her face. She got arrested. She was the only person to get arrested. She compares it to the riots in Baltimore, where the governor had to call in the National Guard, and people were being assaulted, cars were being burned, stores were being looted. So she compares the two and says it's the same thing. That's what the Democrat Party has become.
Could you back up a minute? Have you been drinking the Fox Kool-Aid that doesn't allow you to say Democratic? You blanked out again.
It's the Democrats.
Democratic Party, right?
Yeah.
I'm trolling you. Oh, okay. No, because this whole thing started with Rush Limbaugh, and then Fox News bought it. The Democrat Party. I won't call them Democratic. They're not Democratic. Anyway, I just wanted to be sure. I just wanted to be sure that you weren't inoculated by the Fox serum, because I've spent years railing against the other side. But this is an interesting dynamic, and I wanted to ask you about this a little bit apropos of this discussion, because you realize you're on the border, which of course you're not, but you're on the border of being called a racist, and which is the problem here. Because my sensibility is this, that if the people who tend to skew left, as I do, if we don't call out, now I'm sure I'd be rejected by the left now anyway, but if we don't call out the people with whom, or for the most part, we once or in many ways agree, then no one else is going to do it. Then we're no better than the Republicans that we would cast aside for agreeing with Trump's excesses. And that is the problem in the country. Where did honor go? Where did it go?
That's a good question. But you're right. I mean, if you criticize anything that, these people are saying, you're immediately a racist because you don't agree with their policies.
And why should a guy who directs a play, I don't know if you heard what I said about Louis C.K., the left, which rightfully wants people to be treated with compassion, forgiveness, and restoration, why are they so damning and want to condemn people for all eternity for the things that they don't like? Don't they get that they're behaving the same way that their oppressors did?
No, they don't. They don't get it.
So Louis C.K. doesn't get a second chance. He does. Same. I'm just appalled by it. I don't know what the answer is, because people don't talk and they force people to take sides. So here in the middle, I've managed, I'm sure, to talk off everybody except the moderate. It does drive me out of my skull. And now let's go to another issue. I only looked at the summaries because I refused to have my life ruined emotionally. I looked at the major news reports at the end of the day, and then this morning I did my homework and got to the net. But even the Justice Roberts had to tell both sides to get more civil yesterday. Did you aware of that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I think Roberts, everybody thinks that Roberts is going to, do what the Republicans want, and that's not true.
He's a real.
I think he's an honest guy, and you've seen it in some of the votes that he's cast over the years. That he really takes it seriously. He's a very smart guy, and I think he's going to run this in a way that's impartial, and it's going to, in order to the benefit of the country. Although
he doesn't have much say, and what amazes me is on both sides, because this is what the Senate says it is. On one hand, I have the sense, well, why not have testimony? Why not produce evidence if it's a trial? But on the other hand, it's not a trial as we know it. It's whatever the Senate says it is. And I guess the Democrats are going to have to accept that. But there's something, see, what bothers me, and I keep going back to this, Vince, is I don't want Don't tell me it didn't happen. Just say it doesn't rise to the level of impeachment. Just say it doesn't rise to the level of removal of office. But don't say it didn't happen. It's going to give me a nervous breakdown.
See, I think originally when the founding fathers put that provision in the Constitution, I thought.
There goes his 10-cent phone again. Go ahead. Norton. You're not boomfing right, Norton. I didn't hear you again.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I think the founding fathers were of the mindset that it would get sorted out in the House of Representatives during the impeachment hearings, that reasonable people would come together and look at,
Yeah.
Well, in the past they did, and they would look at the circumstances and the evidence presented, and that if a high crime or misdemeanor was committed, when it went to the Senate, it was almost, I don't want to say rubber stamp, but it was almost, well, you know what? Yeah, all we have to do is look at it and say, yep, we agree with you guys.
Well, that's not the way it works anymore. The way it's working now is both sides just don't even want to give an inch in terms of cooperation. So, and this, Vince, would you agree that this really is all about the election coming up in 2020?
Well, it depends what you mean by that. I think that he did commit high crimes and misdemeanors. Now, I don't think that they brought the impeachment to bear because of the election. I frankly think they made a mistake. If you want to look at it in terms of the election, I think they should not have brought the impeachment. I think they should have kept.
Go ahead.
Wow, they should have kept hammering at him about what he did. Keep it in the forefront, because what's going to be the result when the Republicans do acquit Trump? He's going to say, see, I didn't do anything wrong. It was all the Democrats' conspiracy to get me out of office, and it's just going to help him in the reelection. So I don't think that they did it.
Well, yeah, but it's going to help him in the election because the public doesn't have time to know and read the details. But there are people who don't care. There are people who want this president there and do not care about the details. I think that his line that he could shoot somebody in Fifth Avenue and he'd still keep 35% of the vote is absolutely true.
Well, that's the whole point, Bob. If the American public knew and cared about the details and took the time to acquaint themselves with them, he wouldn't have been elected in the first place.
That is absolutely true.
Although you did have Her Majesty Hillary running against him.
Oh, Her Majesty! You didn't hear the story I did yesterday, did you? And I knew it was going to irk you that this Republican Senate, this Republican State Department, this Republican Justice Department found no corruption in her dealings. Didn't say President Clinton, in her dealings with the Clinton Foundation.
Okay.
Well, at least you accept that. I've got people who say, "No, she's crooked, Hillary. She's making babies commit sex acts in a pizzeria in Virginia." What do we do with a population like that? I don't get it. I'm never getting over those housewives coming up to me and telling me that Michelle Obama is a man. Never. I'm never going to get over that. It's just shoot me now.
Well, the other day she said that. Nobody likes Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, she's
quote,
going nuts with that.
And whom she called a career politician who got nothing done. Well, Hillary, what did you do in your whole career?
I told him.
And she says she doesn't apologize for her frankness. She says, "I thought you wanted me to be authentic and unvarnished."
Oh, well, yeah. Well, listen, we trolled you, and we trolled you successfully. Vince, thank you very, very much. We'll talk to you again later. Go take your medication. Thank you so much.
Talk to you tomorrow.
Vince Russo, everyone. As you can see, he has an issue, and I do believe that ringing, I got to lower that ringer, is none other than our next guest. We asked him to come on at 8:35 today because 9 o'clock he has other engagements. He is, of course, one of the finest and best known national security experts on the planet. He was in Europe last week. We try not to say where and how, or his travels. He has written books. He has a column in UPI. He advises governments. He advises corporations. He advises generals and foreign ministers. Please welcome, without further ado, and let me get my button on it, Harlan Ullman. Good morning, sir.
Morning, Bob.
I don't know if you were up until 2 in the morning watching any of this, but your take on how it's going so far. And this previous guest was saying he thinks that John Roberts, to the extent that he'll have any input, will be fair-minded. What's your take thus far, sir?
In a court of law, if you don't have the facts, you argue the case. And if you don't have the case, you complain. And whereas I thought, Bob, that the Democrats did not do a good job in fashioning the articles of impeachment, I was not impressed with Nadler or with Schiff.
Mm-hmm.
What they have presented is an A-plus Harvard Law School brief that anybody at law school needs to read. Because for a fair and objective observer, this was game, set, and match. And what was particularly good about what they had done is that they have now criminalized the articles of impeachment by claiming a cover-up, which leads back to Watergate. And the relentlessness and the way that they presented their evidence was overwhelming, with the exception of Jerry Nadler making that rather foolish comment, which caused the Supreme Court Chief Judge to reprimand both him and Pat Cipollone, the leading counsel.
Yes.
What was also interesting was that I thought Adam Schiff, who I did not find particularly attractive in the hearings, was brilliant, in my judgment, in his manner, in his style, in the way that he was a massively powerful rebuttalist. And I thought that the president's attorneys were awful. They were unprepared. They did not understand the facts. They were just complaining and moaning. And it seems to me that any reasonable, objective observer would say, wow, I better think this over. And even Lindsey Graham, after listening to that evidence, cannot be so cocksure that the president has not committed a crime and that this impeachment may be worthy of removal from office. Now, one of the problems of the Republican counsels was that the way that they should have argued this, in my judgment, was simply saying that, look, the president has powers. The president did not believe he was doing anything wrong. He wanted to weed out corruption. If this was misunderstood by his subordinates, it's their problem. And do you really want to convict and reject the president from office, having done this excellent job, based on what really is a very interesting conspiracy theory that has been put together by the Democrats, but is based in tying together imperfect pieces of logic, which in one hand would enable you to show why the Washington Redskins should have defeated the Green Bay Packers 150-0 in the last game they played. They've not done that. They've simply followed presidential guidance to rant and rave and say how unfair this is. And I think that in presenting all the evidence so far for any American who is watching this, clearly they have to be very disturbed about what the president did, because I thought their presentation could not be any better. And using this approach of cover-up, to me, was masterful. I also thought that Mitch McConnell looked exhausted. I thought he looked really pretty worn out, given the relentlessness of the attacks. And quite frankly, and I'm not a fan of the Democrats, as you well know, but I thought that with the exception of Nadler, the people that they presented as managers did excellent job. They had people of color. They had lots of women. And basically, aside from Pam Bondi, the Republicans presented old white guys. And so just from an optics perspective, I think that the Democrats have carried the day. Now we'll see what happens. And in many ways, while I think that the president's removal from office is still quite remote, because you don't know what's going to happen if John Bolton is, in fact, called. My guess is, if he is called, that he will do the dirty on Mick Mulvaney, the chief of staff, absolving the president, and put the blame on Mulvaney, but we will see. But having said that, it would seem to me that John Roberts is taking all of this aboard. And I think if John Roberts were asked for his opinion, he would say the president is guilty. Now, I have no way of making that statement, except I believe that John Roberts is very, very fair-minded. And the overwhelming and relentless presentation of evidence and questions about how could this have happened, how could they not know, by the Democrats was really extremely powerful, and that will not be lost in my judgment on John Roberts.
My guest, of course, Harlan Ullman. Harlan, I'm going to run a question by you, and I don't think I've ever framed a question to you this way, but I have to. Are you not being overly optimistic that the American people actually care?
I think down deep they do. I mean, people are busy with other things. But look, this happened during the Nixon impeachment hearings. People were outraged. Unfortunately, there's no Howard Baker saying, what did the president know and when did he know it? But I think it's very, very difficult to duck these issues. And even if you just pay scant attention, the overwhelming evidence presented by the Democrats, to me, is something that Americans cannot ignore. Now, I was listening earlier when you talked about some women who came up and said that Michelle Obama was a man. I mean, you're going to get 10% Looney Tunes who are not going to believe anything. But I think most Americans are going to stand back and say, wow, we'll see. I do think the president is likely to be acquitted. But at this stage, I think the Democrats have really assorted a war chest of evidence that they can use in the election campaign. And I think Donald Trump will come out of this quite wounded. And it doesn't mean that after this is over, the Democrats cannot come up with another charge of impeachment or allegations of, or I should say, articles of impeachment for actually breaking the law. We'll see, but this is far from over. And if the Republican Senate refuses to call witnesses and refuses to allow further evidence to be brought into the trial, I think this will do them a huge disservice come November. And if the Democrats are clever, they will have won a big political victory, even though they were not successful in outing the president at this stage. Now, having said that, they have to get a candidate who can win. This is a Democratic Party who nominated George McGovern, who was a fine man, a great senator, a World War II hero, but just was not capable of winning. Mm-hmm. Mike Dukakis, who could not win. Hillary Clinton could not win. So it's not inconceivable that the Democrats can nominate somebody who cannot win. And rather than say, blame Donald Trump for being elected president, I blame the Democrats for not presenting a candidate who could beat Trump. So I think that there's blame to go on both sides.
Gee, you give me so much stuff. I'm gonna take the latest first, and then we'll take a step back. What did you make of the New York Times? I still have lumps in my head from banging it against the wall, coming up with two names to support, one of whom probably can't get elected for sure, which is Miss Warren. What were they thinking?
Well, first of all, they were thinking they didn't want Joe Biden, which they should have said, we don't want Joe Biden. Their argument, I would have thought, was that here is somebody who's after reform, Amy Klobuchar, who's moderate, and if reform is not good enough, here's revolution. So I understand what the Times did, but at some stage they're going to have to pick. And so I think what they should have said was, for the moment, there's reform and revolution. Here are two candidates we would endorse to be president. And as this unfolds, we will get back to you with our final choice. They did not do that, and so the ambiguity there, I think, nullifies their genuine intent to try to provide two options.
As much as I hope you're right, I want to go back to something earlier you said. In fact, you opened up this conversation talking about the old acts of if the facts are with you, pound the facts. If the facts aren't with you but the law is, pound the law, and if neither, pound the table. The Republicans have firmly committed to pounding the table. The people that they have are, for the exception of Cipollone, are media stars. The president wants it to be.
No, they're not media stars. They appear on media. I don't think they're particularly
No, but you know,
good.
yeah, no, right, but you know what I mean. And all the Republicans are now in lockstep, except maybe for those 3 or 4 who were questioned. You mentioned Lindsey Graham. they've already committed to, we're going to pretend this didn't happen and go to the grave with it. I just don't see them changing their minds. I think that they've said, this is what we're going to do, and we don't care what the evidence is.
Well, we'll see. If witnesses are called and all of a sudden there become a series of smoking guns, and the Democrats were really quite clever. I think if the evidence came out, it would be overwhelming that the president broke the law and authorized a cover-up. Now, the question is whether or not that's worthy of removal from office. And the Republicans who will vote for acquittal will say, yeah, we agree that what the president did was wrong. They're going to have to make that statement. But we do not believe, given his other accomplishments, that this warrants removal from office, just as was the case with Bill Clinton. That's their fallback position if they're smart. We'll see if they're smart or not.
Well, we shall see that. Again, our guest, Harlan Ullman. Harlan, you've spent time, and I know I'll never tell people exactly where you are, what you do in terms of that, because you need to travel safely, et cetera. But you travel the planet on a regular basis. How is this being viewed in the rest of the world?
By and large, and Davos is a good case in point, America is being viewed as a clown show. People just have lost respect. Most people who look at this, or I shouldn't say most people, but certainly two-thirds, view Trump as a nightmare. And they just scratch their heads that America has really lost its way, lost its standing. How could it possibly have elected this guy who has been so disruptive and so dangerous to world politics, whether it's environment, whether it's Russia, whether it's killing Soleimani, whether it's threatening NATO. So right now, the impression, generally speaking, and the generalization is not always correct, is very, very unfavorable. The question is, however, whether or not this is reparable, whether this is correctable. And if Trump gets a second term, I would say there are going to be sufficient dents in our Constitution that I'm not sure that this is fixable ever. And that's quite a statement, because we have gone through a civil war, we've gone through a depression, we've gone through 2 world wars, and the Constitution has more or less endured. But I think at this stage, especially if the Supreme Court decides by a narrow margin, 5-4, not to release Trump's taxes and business records, you now have politicized the third branch of government. And I don't know that there's any way of changing that. So the country will become so politicized. And if the Democrats cannot find a satisfactory nominee, and quite frankly, why I like Joe Biden, the guy is almost as old as I am. And so who wants to have, a late 70s president and somebody who, no matter what his experience is and background is, sometimes has difficulty expressing himself with the English language. Now, clearly, George W. Bush was a malaprop and spoke with 2 feet in his mouth most of the time. But George Bush was 20-odd years younger than Joe Biden.
I understand.
And so I think that there are going to be some real reservations. If Biden were 60 or 65, I don't think there would be a doubt in anybody's mind. Whether Bloomberg can make it, but Mike Bloomberg is, 77. So you've got age here, which unfortunately is a detriment. And you have Trump, who will uncover any stone and use any kind of tactic to win. It's going to be a brutal election. And with 43%, Trump's strategy will be to win the Electoral College, which he did before, and that 43% may be sufficient. Now, the Democrats, as you know, are making Milwaukee the home for their convention because they want to win Wisconsin, they want to win Pennsylvania, they want to win Michigan, and they probably want to win Florida and Arizona as well as Ohio. But we'll see what happens and what unfolds. The irony is that the Democrats, as I said earlier, Bob, have presented a very powerful and unrelenting case. We'll see how much difference it has to make, but it certainly has gotten John Roberts' attention, and I hope that most Americans who are busy with their own lives will pay at least some degree of attention, because the information, the data, the facts that they have presented so far are overwhelming, and at least raised more than the question, we need Mulvaney to testify, we need Bolton to testify, and we need access to these memos, which will show, I believe, incontrovertibly, that the president did what he was accused of doing, namely using his office for political gain, which is illegal. Now, if that is worthy of impeachment, or I should say conviction, we'll see what happens. But certainly I think that those facts can be proven without a reasonable doubt.
I want to bring up just some local stuff that's going on here that I think
Sure.
helps Trump. And you may have heard me talk about it a little bit earlier today if you were listening in. We have a borough president in Brooklyn. I mean, Brooklyn's got a couple of million people, very influential politically, at least here in New York. And the borough president here, a left-leaning, a far left now-leaning guy, is telling people from Iowa and the Midwest who come here to get careers and move to Brooklyn, he's telling them to go home, that they're not welcome. That's number one. Number two, the state has passed this bail law, which is backfiring regularly on a daily basis because it does not give the judges any discretion. Three, the far left of the party, Ocasio, is now in every single case of a moderate person being up for re-election, they're primarying them. There's a fracture in the Democratic Party, but more importantly to me, as someone who floats around in the middle here, the left is doing everything that it once criticized the right for. And there's no forgiveness, there's no thoughtfulness, and it is fast approaching being, quite frankly, anti-white. And if that's going to be with a bias, that's not going to, these people are going to start voting for Trump who didn't the last time.
Well, Bob, you're always welcome to live in Washington.
Yeah, I know. No, but this is going on throughout the country. There are pockets of this kind of far left thinking, and what it does is it encourages this either or dynamic that is present in the country today. Or maybe
well, I think, I'm unaware of what's happening in New York. I mean, the points you make, but I think the points you make are really symptomatic of this huge partisan divide and the politicization of American viewpoints, in which the far left and the far right are gaining dominance. I mean, you see this in the alt-right, you see this in the neo-Nazi movements, and you see this on the left. And even though this may only affect, and I don't know there's an accurate number, 5 or 10% total, because it is so radical, it plays off against each other, and it diminishes politics, and it polarizes people in which you're with us or against us. And at some stage, this becomes uncontrollable. I point out that this is a country which has more guns than people. And don't forget, this country got started in a revolution against King George. And I'm not suggesting there's going to be a civil war, but we already had one. But the symptoms here are such that we should begin worrying that the political health of the nation is not good, that there seems to be no incentive to try to bring people together. And if it's not contained, that at some period, whether that's in a year or 50 years, this could really spell a very, very serious turn for the country, because as Thomas Jefferson pointed out, the Constitution should have been changed every generation, because the Constitution, when it was conceived, is an era that's so far gone and so far different from today that I don't believe the Constitution still works, simply because checks and balances is a system of the past, and if the judiciary becomes politicized, there are no checks and balances.
All is lost, yeah.
And the political parties are becoming so extreme that the middle, which represents 70% of America, no longer is represented. And the contradictions in the Constitution, which were resolvable by civility and compromise, may not be resolvable. For example, this great debate as the president of commander-in-chief. Well, the president can start a war in a heartbeat if he is so inclined, without Congress saying word one. Now, this has been true since the dawn of the nuclear age, simply because under certain circumstances, the president may be forced to make a decision that can lead to a world war, and he may get it wrong. But now, as Donald Trump and other presidents have shown, we may engage ourselves in a situation of using force that would lead to a global, or I should say, a regional war. But the whole issue of whether the Congress is right to have power of the purse and appropriate funds has now been dominated by a president who just says, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to disregard you. And if you subpoena me, I'm going to say subpoenas do not affect the president in office. And if the courts cannot resolve that, and if the Congress can't resolve that, we become an ungoverned country.
Well, we have the case where this president did declare the building of a wall a national emergency. Wasn't that a stretch? Right then and there?
Look, the one thing, what Trump has done, other presidents have done before.
Yes.
I mean, there's no question about that. Richard Nixon had his enemies list. Richard Nixon, over Watergate, broke the law, obviously. We talk about Donald Trump firing Jim Comey, the director of the FBI. Bill Clinton fired or forced Bill Sessions, the head of the FBI, to resign for other reasons. The difference between Trump and his predecessors, I mean, Lyndon Johnson camouflaged the fact that he never gave up his businesses and made huge amounts of money as president. In fact, you talk about what's the name of the clause? Remuneration.
The emoluments clause?
The emoluments clause.
Yes.
Johnson regularly violated that without question. He got away with it. The difference is that those presidents acted in certain areas. Trump, on the other hand, believes that as president, he can do anything he wants. And so it's the enormity of the way that he is bending the office of the presidency that makes a difference. Now, his supporters will say, well, he's just being smart and he's exploiting the office of the presidency and the powers of the presidency that other presidents should have done. His detractors will say he's abusing power. But the fact of the matter is, in almost every single area, Trump is doing things that are outrageous that no president has done before. And I don't know that the system is able to deal with this.
Well, we certainly shall see. Again, our guest, Harlan Ullman, we have 5 minutes left with him. He has other duties today. Internationally renowned national security expert. You know his recent books. Of course, A Handful of Bullets, and the more recent book, Anatomy of Failure, How America Loses the Wars. It starts in his column in UPI. You need to check it out. Now, before you go, what should we be keeping our eye on that is being obscured by this impeachment effort and even the Hall of Fame voting? What's going on in the world where maybe we ought to be keeping our eye on and we're not?
Well, there are many things that are going on in the world. One area, as you know, when Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, was assassinated early in January, Abu Mahdi Mohandas was also killed. And that's not a whole household world. But Mohandas, who was an Iraqi, remember he was Iraqi killed in the Baghdad airport, also had the collateral duty of running 150,000 Iraqis who formed the Popular Resistance Movement. That's a pretty big army. And what we don't realize is that it's his death that is going to have the greatest consequences in Iraq for several reasons. First, the Iraqis are furious, by and large, that an Iraqi was killed by the Americans on Iraqi soil. That's against any kind of law. Second, there's now going to be a competition to replace Mohandas, in which even more radical elements are likely to take charge. But worse than that, because there's no cohesion, you're going to see individual units mounting attacks against installations where Americans are present, not only to force the Americans to leave, but to gain leverage in this power struggle. And so whereas everybody focused on Soleimani as being the important person who was killed, what we have done, as Yamamoto said after the Pearl Harbor attack, we have awakened a sleeping giant. And the death of Mohandas in Iraq is the equivalent of a sleeping giant, because now you have the Popular Mobilization Forces who are basically uncontrolled. Factions will be doing all sorts of things. And I fear that, as Winston Churchill said in 1924 about Iraq, it will become a volcano from which we will not be able to extricate ourselves. I think we produced a volcano in Iraq without realizing by killing Mohandas.
You know, in many ways, yeah, I think we did, but I think in many ways, back in 2003, this whole outcome in the Middle East is far worse than people feared, I think. But you would know better
Well,
than
I
I.
mean, look, 2003, George W. Bush wanted to change the geostrategic landscape of the greater Middle East, and he did, catastrophically.
Yes, he did.
This
Hey,
will never be fixed.
do you know what we
Quite
don't
frankly.
ask? I'm sorry, I cut you off only because I'm rushing. Do you know what we don't ask you enough about? And the next time we have an hour, and of course we do every week with you usually, we need to talk a little bit about climate change. It must come up in your work, and where we're headed in the future with this climate. I mean, it's clearly something's amiss. And clearly, we have to stop denying it. And just your original take as a tease for when we talk again.
I think I think the greatest danger facing America and facing most countries is failed or failing government.
Mm-hmm.
But overarching that is climate change. Anybody who does not believe that the climate is changing and being exacerbated by greenhouse gases and by human conduct
Yeah, well,
is irrational.
do you
Is
know?
irrational and unscientific. And as John McCain said, even if we get it wrong, we'll still have a cleaner environment. But if you put all this stuff in the environment, even a child should realize that's not good. And you see what's happening in Australia, and the Australian minister who at Davos said, well, it's only 2% of the country. Well, it's like saying I have cancer, but it's only 2% of my body. I don't understand why it's killing me. I mean, this is ridiculous. Yet nobody wants to admit it. It's a weather fashion. Look what's happening in California. Look what's happening, for example, in Florida. Alabama's going to be waterfront property one day, and so on the east side, not just on the Gulf side,
Right.
and people are ignoring this to our detriment. And the interesting thing is that this is also the way that one could stimulate the economy, not only through what we're doing to have more greener economy, but also through fixing our infrastructure, so that every home that is being built ought to be able to be energy free with solar panels and all sorts of other modern equipment. Should be mandated. I mean, just like we have seat belts in cars, but we just don't seem to be doing it. And I think that if the predictions are correct, and I fear they are, at some stage, you're going to have a potential apocalypse in this country. But on the other hand, this could be a huge movement for economic growth and rejuvenation, which makes sense. However,
Well, one can hope.
we have a president who doesn't believe in any of this
Well, he
stuff.
calls it a
doesn't believe in
hoax.
science and doesn't believe in fact.
By the way, when I retire from radio, I will forbid in my household the use of the word hoax. I never want to hear it again.
What about witch hunt?
But no, it's the hoax thing. If we call this thing a hoax one more time, all of these things, I'm just going to flip out. Harlan Ullman, thank you very much. When's your next column out, and where can people read it?
It's UPI. It's out today, and it's called an open letter to cadets Esper and Pompeo. They were both West Point classmates, in which at West Point the honor code says cadets shall not lie, steal, cheat, or tolerate those that do. My question is, how do they tolerate this president, and what do they say to a young cadet if they go back to West Point? Why should I follow that honor code when the commander-in-chief doesn't?
Okay, thank you so very much. That, of course, Harlan Ullman. Harlan Ullman. We'll talk to you again soon. Very quick break, and then we will be right back. Let's check the weather. I know Anthony's up next. We invited him on. I just want to be sure that you cover the weather. Here it is, 8:03. Today's program is brought to you, or rather, the weather is brought to you exclusively by Not Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. Now, yesterday, and it's absolutely appropriate, got a text, and hey, we need somebody who is supportive of the president, or at least that side of the fence. And I thought that Anthony was actually being a little modest when he said, even me. And it's not even me. Anthony never comes to these microphones unprepared. So in this case, as a guest, we'll use his full name. Please welcome Anthony Galata. Good morning, Anthony. Thank you for calling in.
Good morning, Bob. How are you?
Good. What's your take on all this?
My take has been very simple, Bob, and most things I think I've been at least fairly consistent in talking about the process. I don't deny what happened.
Well, yes. Go ahead.
I have no problem with what happened, because if anybody out there thinks that any previous president hasn't done the same thing, then you know what? I got a bridge for sale in Brooklyn. and let's understand something. That's the difference between the current president and the past presidents. He's not afraid to do things out in front, up in your face. Okay? Now, and you're going to say to me, oh, well, he did this behind the scenes.
No, I'm not going to. I'm going to let you.
No. I want you to. I want you to. You know why, Bob? Because if he was so afraid of what he did was wrong, why would he declassify the documents? Not only the first one, but then they asked for more, and he declassified the second one so that it could be made public.
Well, all I would say to you is I don't think when the president did it, and this probably supports your argument, I don't think he thought he was doing anything wrong. And I'm sure other presidents have done it.
And that's the point I'm trying to make, number one. And again, I always refer to President Obama and the hot mic.
Yes, of course. Okay? I know what you're talking about.
So there is absolutely there's no one out there. And everybody wants to talk about, I listen to Harlan, anybody with a half a brain, who's anywhere in the middle, who's not choosing sides, has to say that this was brilliant and that was ugly and they were unprepared. And guess what? Harlan's not the average person.
Well, I understand. Go ahead.
Okay? So again, I want to go back to the process. Because compared, to you and to Harlan, you guys are historical, scholars compared to me. But in a little bit of research that I've done, and I would ask you this question: what's the biggest fear that the framers had when it came to impeachment?
That it would be the opposition party would just throw them out at will.
Totally political.
Yes.
And what has this proven to be?
It has proven to be political, but on both sides.
Listen, first of all, I don't know if that's quite true, okay, because I do believe we had a Democratic senator vote against impeachment, and I don't believe we had a Republican senator vote for, congressman vote for it, congressperson vote for it.
That is correct. Although, let me say this. One of the things that you haven't thrown in that I will and that I do accept is that a president's behavior needs to be so egregious that even his own party would agree. And that clearly is not the case.
If you want to go, and if you want to travel that route, okay, or even to say half his party should agree, okay, why are we going through a process that has a predetermined outcome?
Because
I don't know. I know. I shouldn't say know of anybody, but it's the vast minority of people who honestly believe that the president is going to be removed from office. Ultimately,
I don't think anybody
that's what
thinks
impeachment decides. Correct?
I don't think that anybody's going to. I don't think I don't think he's going to be removed from office, and I don't think at this point the vast majority of people think that he is. I do believe, and this again goes back to the process, that and this is if the Democrats believe in what they're doing, they have a constitutional duty to do it, and I think the senators have a constitutional duty to vote fairly, which some will, some won't. But once again, I do return to what the founding fathers intended, which is that unless enough Republicans think it merits removal, it shouldn't happen. So you and I are not far apart on that.
You made a telling statement about the Democrats. The Democrats have accomplished their goal already. Nancy Pelosi stated it quite clearly. Remember, she signed the 2 articles of impeachment with how many bullet pens?
Oh, how many?
And she gave them out one at a time, and they glad-handed and high-fived and smiled, okay, over what she said was a solemn time in our country's history.
Anthony, I am going to totally defer to you on this one. That is indefensible.
Okay? Now,
oh my goodness!
Now we turn around and what was their game plan, Bob? What was their ultimate
I know what
goal?
they get.
It's not removal from office. We know that.
No,
their ultimate office was exactly what Nancy Pelosi said. He will be forever stained with impeachment.
Yes, absolutely.
This guy has been stained with so much worse. You think he could care less?
Oh, I
as long as he does not get removed from office, he's a winner in his mind.
No, yes, but I also think he didn't want this stain. But as any good fighter knows, once you take your punch, you move on to the next thing. I think you're right now. I think he would have preferred, though, not to be impeached.
Listen, there's nobody on this earth that would be in his position that would want to be impeached.
No, that's true. So
you know. And I don't think, and I mean, everybody knows he's never going to back away from a fight, number one, especially when he feels he's holding the cards.
No. Hey, if I might ask, I don't know if you heard my monologue or today at all, but you know, maybe because we live in New York, I'm getting angrier and angrier. But is the far left out of their minds, or is it just
Bob,
me,
I've
or am I
been
doing
telling
this
you they've
too
been
long?
out of their minds for years. You didn't believe me, just like you didn't believe me when I told you a fee was a tax.
Well, hey, but let's give this little. I shouldn't call myself little. Let's give this devil his due. My mind is changeable. I keep an open mind, and you see where I am with all of that now. And hopefully I'll continue to be that way. But it's gotten worse. I mean, they're just nuts. I mean, do you see this
think
guy
about
in
this.
Brooklyn?
If a Midwesterner had said he didn't want New Yorkers,
yeah, imagine
you know what he'd be labeled?
A racist and a communist.
You're right, but because it was a New Yorker,
New York,
that chastised somebody, okay, that word will never come into play.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, Anthony, thank you. And listen, I really felt, and I said it to you in the text, you always come prepared. You keep an open mind. You do your homework. Your opinion as a guest is totally valued. So please.
Well, it's not a question of that, Bob. I just think that you need to devote a little more effort into finding someone maybe like KT McFarland.
I reached out,
who can still be reasonable even though she's a conservative.
Oh, I love KT, as you know, but she ran into this Flynn thing. She's not ready to come on yet. But you know who's pretty fair that way, too, is Mr. Duffy. But, yeah, I will get somebody. You got my word on that. But still, I appreciate your doing this nonetheless.
You got it.
Thank you, Anthony. Take care. If we don't continue to talk, folks, all is lost. Now, would you please sit down in the seat of honor, Jake? Jake did a little bit of homework today, and this is get over on mic 3 where people can see you. No. You don't want to be seen today? All right. Well, we'll put you. Oh yeah, get out. Go over there. Come on. People love you. Your wife wants to see you. She had to leave for work and not see her man. Folks, Jake Schaefer, of course, he's our sports guy, our seer, our prophet, our prognosticator, our handicapper, but also he does production work. And we're going to talk about, of course, the Hall of Fame, but he's also done his homework and he's gone through the files. I see we've picked a few letters from the sacks and sacks of letters, postcards, Western Unions. I didn't think anybody did that anymore.
They're coming in.
Hold on. I'm sorry, but yes, say hello again.
Good morning.
All right. Let's see what we got. Dear Mr. Marrone, if you decide to run for president, who is on your short list for vice president, and what would your number one platform be? Martin in White Plains. My number one platform would be return to common sense, the radical middle, and who would I pick as my vice president? Give me a little time on that. All right, for the VP, but I'll put that up here. Okay. Do you have any nicknames? If not, I have a few suggestions. Radio Robert, Bob the Broadcaster, Thunderlips, Fondly Wanda. Actually, I do have some nicknames. You want to know from my nickname as a kid, my nickname in high school, or my hockey nickname? Pick one. I had 3.
Both.
Okay, hockey nickname is Doc. and it has been for about 50 years, because of I've always been a bit of a nerd, and know stuff I probably shouldn't be reading about. And you hear it in the medical show I do. Anyway,
Because of your reminiscence of a seven dwarf.
yes, one of the seven dwarfs. At any rate, one of my guys gets smashed into the screen in a place called Abe Stark in the old the New York Met League, a good league. He says, "Oh, my arm hurts." Don't worry about it. I'm sure it's nothing. Look, can you do this? Can you do that? Blah blah blah. And at 4 a.m, he calls me up and he says, "I'm in the hospital. My arm's broken in 4 places. Doctor," and that's how it stuck. I was also called Buzz on the basketball team in Bishop Ford, and I was also known as a young kid as Speedy because I used to run everywhere.
Buzz, Doc, and Speedy.
Yep. What's your preference? Doc sticks to this day. I mean, people will ask me to pass the puck, and they'll still ask for Doc.
I like Buzz.
Although I was called Mush once but that's just this one guy did it because I had to go on vacation during a playoff game and my team won, and so they said I would have been bad luck had I stayed. Okay, we still need to discuss your accent or lack thereof, according to you. Jake's wife, who is also your sister, your cousin, and some say perhaps even your long-lost mom. Okay. My accent, it's probably 80% on the air removed. Another 20% still shows up, like New York, or I drop an R occasionally. But now upstate, you guys don't have an accent. Buffalo, you do. You two
Buffalo,
Mayes,
yes.
they like water. Now, are you one of those guys when you grew up and your sister, I mean your wife, or whatever genetic mutation?
It's her birthday today, so you might want to take it a little easy.
Oh.
You're very spiteful.
Wait, no. Let's say happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. I'm sorry you made the husband selection you made. Happy birthday to you. You guys have any kids yet?
We do not.
This is going to be
Thank
great.
God.
This genetic mix, 3 heads, 17 eyes. Actually, happy birthday. My best star and someone who's been a real supporter of the radio station. Now, I've decided on my vice presidential choice. Your wife. I want her to be on my ticket. She has a good taste in men.
She's a real dynamo.
She is a dynamo. She's an educator. So that's my choice. Now, we move on to, before we go to our next guest, and we have some time. What did you think of the selections yesterday? I know poor Tom from Pelham last night was blasting out to the world. Walker. Oh my God, Walker. They picked the top guy and the lowest guy and missed everybody in the middle. What's your take on this?
Were you upset the steroid guys didn't get in?
I wasn't upset. I just think that it's a hypocrisy that the sport's going to have to come to grips with. What about you? And again,
They're going to get in. They're going to get in at some point. What's really going to be interesting is Jeter is going to go in this summer in Cooperstown. They're expecting over 80,000 people just to go to see Jeter at the induction this summer. Next year, the only viable candidate, I think, is Schilling. How many people are actually going to make the trip to Cooperstown, New York? How many Schilling fans are there out there?
You know what? Politically, he and I are oil and water. I'd go. He was a great pitcher. He actually did in real life what that wonderful movie, The Natural, depicted in fiction. I mean, he pitched with his leg bleeding, for God's sakes. He was a good pitcher, and that's what he should be recognized for.
Yeah, I think he'll get
Politics,
in.
religion, and sexual orientation should be secondary considerations. In fact, they shouldn't even be public considerations. That what people do that way is their business.
I think he will get in next year. He's trending up.
Now, what about some of these other people that were listed that didn't make the grade? Is there anybody you thought should have been put in that didn't?
Bonds and Clemens.
Okay, but now who wasn't mixed up in the steroid thing? Because I agree with you there, but Jones, anybody else? No one else?
No one else was really close.
Were you surprised by that?
I think some people are Scott Rowland. He went from 12% last year to 30% this year, and he still has, I think, 5 more votes to go. So I think he'll get to 75. I think Jeff Kent's going to get in. He went up significantly. I think Omar Vizquel's going to get in. He went up significantly. Mm-hmm. Bonds and Clemens is so close. There's so many people that just will not check their boxes.
Okay, what do you think of the fact that someone out there didn't vote for Jeter? I was glad they didn't.
I just think it's Mariano Rivera's biggest fan.
Oh, whoever that is.
That's the only thing I could think of.
Although, you know what surprises me? I didn't realize it was such a big deal to have every vote. How come some of these other people didn't? The Lou Gehrig's and Willie Mays'? How come they didn't have every vote? Or was it a different system then?
I think a lot of voters they do not want them in on the first vote, so they will wait until the second vote. Vladimir Guerrero should have gotten in and his first vote a couple years ago. But they wanted him to wait, so he got in on his second vote.
I mean, because it's New York, and two, because it's St. Jeter, which is overrated. Everybody's upset that it wasn't. It's like in work, when you work for a corporation, they added these things when they do the annual appraisals. They added this exceeds, and then exceeds, and then totally exceeds requirements. And everybody's upset if they don't get the absolute top grade. They don't care what it is. It could be B minus, and everybody wants it. So. Look, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
Sure.
I'm sure he's happy. He's a great ball player. I think it was a little bit of a fraud as a personality, but that's just me. And when
He's very overrated as a defensive player.
Well, yes, but
The analytics show he was not a strong shortstop.
No, but he was good enough, and he was a great hitter and a clutch hitter and a good citizen. So, except he used to throw baseballs to the women. Take a baseball.
Come on, you would have done a lot worse.
Oh, of course I've already said A, I'd be dead, and B, I'd be in jail. So, I think Anthony called back. I think he wanted to weigh in on this. Let's see what he has to say. Call back. I'll pick you up. Let's see what.
Did you stay up to watch all of the the hearings last night?
No, I went with summaries because the whole issue, and I'll share this with you. I mean, I share it with the audience. I'm sorry, I put that up too loud. I'm so concerned about the country that I got to read summaries or I'll go nuts. Hold on. Anthony, you're on the air.
Hey, yeah, I just wanted to weigh in real quick.
Yeah,
on
we
this.
wanted to hear you. Go ahead.
Number one, I totally agree with Jake. 80,000 of New Yorkers coming to New York is not hard to do. But next year, it's going to be pretty hard to duplicate. But here's the question one has to ask when they consider Jeter. Mm-hmm. Once somebody's elected at 100%, that now becomes the bar.
Yeah, that's the point.
Okay, so is Jeter in the same class as Mariano? No. It's just really that simple. Now, we can argue whether he's 1 vote short, whether he's 5 votes short, whether he's an 80%er, an 85%er. That's fair game.
So
but
according
there's no question, he's not on Mariano's level.
To that rationale, do you think Jeter and Mariano are the 2 greatest baseball players of all time?
No.
Yeah, I think it's
and
pointless.
This is what has to be taken into consideration. You also have to take into consideration the era that they played in.
Yes, you do. Although I would say that Mariano may well be the greatest relief pitcher of all time. I mean, the guy,
and the other, yes, absolutely. But
he never aired.
Mariano, I agree, but that's my point. Is he is so exceptional.
Yeah.
He not only dominated his position, he dominated the game.
Yes.
That's the difference.
In the middle of the steroid era.
Listen, no doubt about it. And if you want to talk about Jeter, nothing's been proven. But he was in the middle of it, too. We talk about cork bats. We talk about baseballs that are wound differently, that have different centers, the seams are different. So, everything comes into play. Do we put an asterisk next to everybody?
And what about the ballparks? I know Hank Aaron was hitting home runs when the fences were a lot further back than they are now.
Hey, Anthony, did you...
I can remember Frank Howard hitting one out in center field. The old Washington Stadium. I don't think anybody's ever hit one that far.
Hey, Anthony, did you ever get to the Polo Grounds?
That's Bob. That's before my time. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Well, the Polo Grounds, center field, you could land.
Just remember,
plane.
you and I may share the same birth month, but there are about 5 years of difference.
Fine.
Yeah, come on, Doc.
Oh, yeah, you can throw my hockey. Well, you can. My hockey nickname is well established.
I like Buzz better. I like Buzz. The little fly that gets swatted.
I got to go to my next guest. I hate you too. Anthony, goodbye. Go back. He's got to go back under his rock. And we've got to get to my friend A.J. Woodson. Folks, Jake is the man. And we'll be back. We'll have more to talk with him a little bit later before we close the show. My next guest, friend of the program, one of the people that does the heavy lifting in his town when it comes to reporting. He's the managing editor and publisher of A.J. Woodson. In fact, we need to bring him into this discussion, too. He loves sports, and I probably shouldn't have chased Jake so quickly. Please welcome A.J. Woodson. He's gone. Did I hit the wrong button? Did I hit the wrong button? I must have hit the wrong button because he wasn't there. A.J. Woodson will be joining us directly, and we may need to actually reach out to him. Oh, by the way, Tom Ralph wanted to weigh in on this. Yeah, we can do that. And then we'll talk to A.J. Woodson in a moment, but let me get... I love this system. I love this system. Oh, no, that's me guest. That's me guest. Okay. I already said hello to him. Please welcome A.J. Woodson. Good morning, A.J.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
It is always a pleasure to have you, and we have a couple of things, a million things we wanted to ask you about today. But since we were just talking sports, Jake, you should come back to the seat of fame because I wanted to get this man's take. A.J. Woodson is the managing editor and publisher, editor-in-chief, actually, I should say, of Black Westchester magazine. What Bob Cox does here in Rochelle, he does a great job of in Mount Vernon, but also the rest of the county. But he's a sports guy, too. You know him. And I'll say hello again. I want to be sure you
Good
love
morning,
it.
A.J.
Okay. A.J., Hall of
Yes.
Fame. What's your take on the ballot?
I don't know. I heard. I guess the question was about.
Derek Jeter was shy one vote. He got 99% of the vote. I think that's fine.
I'm fine with that. I have no problem with that.
And this guy Walker, Jake, can you give us a little more information about Walker, and then I want to get his take.
Great hitter, great fielder. Is a much better fielder than the analytics say. Much better fielder than Jeter. A lot of people have a problem with him because he plays in Colorado and the altitude, so they think his hitting statistics are a bit skewed. But he's a great hitter. Hit a lot of home runs in Colorado. Hit a lot of home runs away from Colorado.
How many years did he play? You know,
He played 11 years.
Okay, so not a hell of a long time. Did you have any? What about the steroids? The steroid era? Would you have Barry Bonds? Go ahead.
I want to say about the person that you just mentioned. Unfortunately, even if we pretend it doesn't exist, popularity has a lot to do with it as well.
Oh yeah, that's what we've been
playing for the. I mean, he was the man for the Yankees, and the Yankees is the Yankees. You know what I'm saying? So
yes.
Playing in Colorado again, is just not the same thing. And I think popularity, not that Jeter doesn't deserve it, but I think popularity plays a big part of that in that voting.
Well, the guy who said that first, I'm sure others did, but the first that I heard, Reggie Jackson used to say when he was in Oakland that if I played in New York, they'd name a candy bar after me. He did, and they did. I don't know. Do you remember the Reggie bar, either of you?
Yes, I do. I probably had one or two. Can't remember what it tastes like.
I'm going to let you off the hook on that. One or two, huh? I had a few Reggie bars. He was my favorite Yankee during those years. So, any other comments about baseball, about the Hall of Fame voting? What about the steroid era? What's your take on that?
I'm torn between that because while steroids, I guess, amplifies your abilities, steroids still couldn't take a scrub and make a superstar out of him. So you had to have some abilities to begin with. So I'm torn between that whole thing.
Yeah, and then there were guys that didn't start with steroids until the latter parts of their career. I think Bobby Bonds was a great player long before his head swelled to the size of the Washington Monument. And,
right.
And same thing with Clemens.
As well.
7 Cy Youngs. My God, how do you keep this guy out?
The Red Sox owner called him fat, so and traded him. So that led to steroids.
What say you, AJ?
I mean, Barry Bonds is another one. He was hitting a number of home runs before
Oh yeah.
the so-called steroid situation. Did it make him a better player, or did it extend his abilities a few more years? I can't say, but I mean, he was a dynamic player beforehand.
I'm going to get myself in trouble again with all this age bias, but do either of you remember his dad, Bobby Bonds? Great ball player.
I never saw him play, but I know he played for the Yankees,
Would
right?
have been even better. He led the hard sort of playboy life, but he would have been better had he stayed healthy. But he was a great ball player too. Do you remember him at all?
I remember the name. I think that was my granddad's favorite player.
Thanks. I really appreciate that a lot.
I couldn't help it.
I got to get new friends and new associates. Well done. Well done. All right. That ends our sports segment. Thank you, Jake. And thank you, AJ. Let's cover some Mount Vernon things, and then I want to get your advice on what we can possibly do to get more conversation and drive people towards the middle a little bit. What's the latest in Mount Vernon?
Well, I don't know if it's the latest, but there's been the big, the controller not paying the employees their overtime.
Oh boy, we go back to the. Please tell me all about this. I will shut my mouth. My ears are the size of my mouth.
I don't know the whole story, but I do know. I personally know police officers that I've talked to. I personally know firefighters that I talked to, and I personally know some members of DPW and other employees who worked overtime, and their overtime was not in their check on Friday.
I'm sorry. I'm laughing because it's the controller. Has she given any good reason to the mayor as to why this hasn't happened?
I don't know. I don't know. There's been people blaming the payroll system process. I'm still looking into it, and I honestly have not reached out to the controller lately yet, which is a plan of mine, to sit down with her and go over all of these things, because there's so much being said, and I'm not hearing anything from her. I'm just hearing things about her.
I'm going to be a little bit snarky. Gee, why am I not surprised? But again, she could be a hero and not a villain. You know, maybe she's not paying it because she's discovered that they were trumped up or not real bills. But I'd be very interested. Have you talked to the mayor yet? And you may have answered that to me. Have you talked to the mayor?
I have not specifically talked to the mayor on this topic. She's made a couple of comments, and the employee. I also with Damon, when the topic was broached on social media, Damon was saying that he faults the union, the head of the union, as a union delegate and somebody who was in the union for 30 years. He said if that happened at his job, they would be up in arms. There would be a price to pay. The union would be, would handle their business. And obviously the union is not, you pay dues to your union to handle situations like this, and they're not handling it.
Well, no. Although, again, I think that this is something that the mayor, certainly she was intimately warned by me and others that she would going to have to deal with this controller. And her answer to me was, and it was one of the few times it was, contentious is not the right word. It was more benign than that. But she said, well, I have a great relationship with the controller. And I said, it's not your job to have a great relationship with the controller, nor hers. It's her job to do her duty.
And Andre Wallace, while he was mayor for that short period of time, I remember him making the same remarks. He had a good relationship with the controller, but there were still some things that ended up not getting paid. I'm not quite sure what's going on. I know the rumor keeps going that Richard Thomas is running for controller, and I know if this continues to be a problem, I I don't know what his chances are, but I wouldn't be surprised if he wins.
I've heard that rumor too, and I've asked him that on the air. He was a little bit, what's the right word, coy about it. But I also think right now, and I wouldn't blame him, I think he's a little more worried about that lawsuit that's trying to seek claw money back from him and others regarding the monies that were involved paid out of the water department. But perhaps you're right that once that's all sorted out, he'll run for it. But but is it at all possible that if it's discovered that the controller once again is either taking the law into her own hands, perhaps, I shouldn't say once again, purportedly, or that is less than competent, isn't it possible that the city council will finally say enough and impeach her?
You know what? I have to look. I don't know if that's a possibility.
There always has to be a way to remove someone from office, or, and heaven forbid that we rely on the controller or the governor or any of the timids up in Albany.
The state has failed the city of Mount Vernon. The governor,
Absolutely.
the controller, the state has failed, and the attorney general.
Yep.
They have all failed
Yep.
The city of Mount Vernon, and they all promise to do all these things. And I think the county sometimes has failed, but the state has failed the city of Mount Vernon.
Absolutely, and and I know that many people were not a fan. There are those that were. Many people were not a fan of Richard Thomas's mayoralty, but one of the things, because I saw the documents, I'm sure you did too, is when finally the Attorney General's office came in. Then later they send an email to the mayor saying, we got to go. There's something important. Oh, and by the way, don't bother for cleaning out that office because we're not coming back.
Wow.
I'm never getting over that one. I'm never getting over that one. So the controller's not playing bills. You know what this means? That I've got to reach out to the mayor now, and without being snarky, I can be snarky now with a little bit of humor. How's your relationship with the controller working out for you?
I do want to add something though.
Please.
Now Now, I don't think that this is an excuse for not paying anybody overtime, but we saw the articles, and I think Jonathan Bandler did a great expose about the police officers and the overtime and the inflating of the overtime. And,
maybe that's why she's not paying the bills. She could be a hero, and she could be in concert with the mayor, actually.
So again, until I get down and talk to her and find out what's going on, I don't want to make a judgment. I just know that there's a lot of employees that are very upset. Like I said, I specifically have spoke to some firefighters, some police officers, and I know some DPW workers who did not get their overtime, and they're very upset. They didn't get their overtime and their checks Friday.
Rightfully so. And again, in all fairness to the controller, it may well be that those stories you cite are the reasons why the overtime was not paid pending some sort of an audit. And that would make a lot of sense. Anything else out of the new mayoralty and in Mount Vernon that needs to be put on the table?
Well, we had sort of a light controversy. The new budget was supposed to include a raise for the mayor, a raise for the controller, a raise for the city council, and an additional raise for the council president. But the council president, Lisa Copeland, posted on her Facebook page why they couldn't do this and why they could, and if they did, it would have to go. It couldn't be current. It would have to be for the next administration. And
you mean the next year or the next administration?
I think the next administration.
Wow, that's 4 years.
And she wrote I covered that on Black Westchester. If people go, they can see the story. And what happened the next day? So the Board of Estimates ended up taking it off the agenda and not voting on it. And then the council president removed her explanation of the situation from her Facebook page. So there was a little bit of, there were residents that were just at the hearing of it was very upset that, one of the first things the new mayor would go in and give herself a raise, and there was a little bit of that, but I'm not sure what the whole story is there. Then there was the the light controversy of the picture of Mayor Thomas being removed from the walls of City Hall twice.
Why would they do
and,
that? That's disrespectful, even if he was forced to resign. Why would they do that?
and one person actually was caught trying to steal the picture and take it out of the building altogether, but was supposedly stopped. And supposedly the picture is back up again. This was the second time. I haven't been able to get to the bottom of all of that as well. But those are the things that are going on and are being talked about in Mount Vernon right now.
Boy, you never have a shortage of things to report on. I'm telling you.
Yeah. And again, I want to be clear. I have not individually confirmed any of these as far as the raises and stuff like that. I'm just going by what I've read and what I've seen, but I have not talked to anybody. The mayor did not give me a comment when I went to approach her about the situation. She didn't have a comment on it. So I'm still, with Mount Vernon, it's like peeling an onion. You have to peel several layers to get to the truth, to get near the truth, actually. So,
We're talking with A.J. Woodson. He's the editor-in-chief of Black Westchester magazine. Again, Mount Vernon is his prime place, but he also covers lots of other stories and the county as well. Were you surprised? And I haven't talked about it a lot yet today. I'm going to do a little more analysis and talk about tomorrow. But the governor has a big budget gap to close, and he says, though, there'll be no tax increases. That probably doesn't bode well for the cities, the school districts, or our Medicaid obligations in the county, does it?
I don't know how you do the whole thing with no tax increase. I know on the county level, when we had Astorino and did the no tax increase thing, the only way, because taxes go up, I mean, the cost of living and everything goes up every year, and things don't get cheaper, they get more expensive. The only way you can do no tax increase for several years is if you start cutting things. So what is being cut for you to bring in a budget with no tax increase? And it's usually programs. It usually trickles down to programs that affect cities like Mount Vernon.
Yes, it does. I'm just amazed at that. I just realized one of my guests didn't call in. I'll probably get him at 8:50. It is. Let me double check something here. It is 8:40. Still 26 degrees. Have you been at all in touch with the county regarding Memorial Field, and do you have anything to add regarding that project?
No, I have not gotten official word from the county. Only thing I know is that when Andre Wallace was there, he did make the move to remove all the dirt that was necessary to move before the county would do anything. And that's done, and supposedly the keys were handed over to the county. I don't think you do a lot of construction this time of year, so I wouldn't expect to see nothing before the spring, I guess. But I have not gotten official word. Now that you've asked me, I'm going to reach out to the county exec's office specifically today and see if I can get an answer on that.
Okay, I wanted to move on to something else. You had noted that you've already interviewed this young man. We interviewed last week a candidate for the 16th Congressional District. His name is Andam, and I got pretty good at it, Gebra Gorgeous.
Yeah, you actually you were better than me. He was Andam G on my show.
Yeah, it took me a while, but I got it now, right? Gebra Gorgeous.
You did well. I was very proud of you.
Well, you know what though? I thought of myself, Bobby Gorgeous, and then finally it fit in. He was a very bright young guy. What a background! All these kids went to all these schools where I served coffee. What do you think? Everybody's primarying everybody, but what did you think of this particular candidate?
We had him on very early. Dr. Bob Baskerville was familiar with him and booked him for the show. I've talked to him personally. I've seen him around Mount Vernon. I think I was very he did a very good interview with you. I was very impressed by his interview with you. I've interviewed actually 3 candidates for the seat now.
Who else?
Samuel Ravello and who did I just have on the show? Oh, but I forgot his name.
Hey, I do it all the time. I'm the guy who has to have the senior moments. So leave that to me.
But so this is the third. There's 3 candidates so far that we've interviewed. And they all have something good to say. We'll see. Jamal Bowman, that's the gentleman I just interviewed Sunday. So I just had him on Sunday, and we had Sammy Ravello on the week before. And I'm reaching out to Engel to, right now I know he's probably dealing with the impeachment stuff and everything up there, but I'm trying to get him on the show as well. And then you have like 10 or more candidates running for Nita Lowey's seat.
Yeah, I'm thinking of running for that. Everybody's running for that seat. We've interviewed a couple of people. Mondane was very impressive young man. Another guy with great chops in the background. They're all young,
Jones.
Yeah,
Mondane Jones. Yeah, I've had him on the show too.
So, all right, let's move on to a couple of other issues, and then we will have you at all been involved in the in what's going on with Playland? Does your paper have a position on it?
I have not got a chance to really get into the whole thing. I've been dealing with the Mount Vernon Hospital proposed closing.
Yeah, that was my next item.
That has engulfed a lot of my attention.
All right, well, let's go there. What's the latest with that? Now, I'm beginning to get the sense that people think it's a lost cause. Well, I don't believe that. What's your take, and what's the latest?
Well, I am on the steering committee for the of the Save and Transform Mount Vernon Hospital. So I've gone to all the meetings. The word is that it's, in the community, a lot of people think that it's a done deal because they see work being done on Sanford Boulevard. What I found out and the information that's coming out, that the Montefiore has 2 processes they still have to go through with the state for it to be a done deal. One, they have to get whatever it is to be able to use the Sanford Boulevard building for health care. They have not been approved for that. And the second is they would then have to go through the process of the decommission of closing the hospital, and they have not got the sign off from the state on either one of those. So I've gone to the steering committee, and which is a gathering of information, and then helping to dispense it to the community. They had a town hall. The 1199 and New York State Nurses Association just had they're in contract negotiations. They had a picket line they had a protest.
They had a protest. Yeah, they had a demonstration.
They had a protest, and I want to give them a lot of credit as well, because they can settle right now with Montefiore, and all of the nurses will have jobs and will work somewhere. But they're keeping the negotiations open to fight for Mount Vernon Hospital. It's going to take the community, I always talk about what the community needs to do. This is going to take a big pushback from the community. And one thing I'm happy to report, they're talking about going to Albany to whenever this first meeting is. And a lot of the Mount Vernon pastors have volunteered their buses and vans to carpool people up to the meeting, which I thought was very good from the black clergy. I always complain that they don't do enough, so I was very happy to hear them do that. And they've been a little vocal, and they're doing a lot of things to try to educate the community that the fight is not over, and what they can do to help.
It was interesting. I'm glad you brought up the clergy, because I asked Damon about it. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to that interview, but he was kind of critical of their involvement. He thinks they should be involved less in the community. So than
You
they
said
are
that they should-
politically.
wait,
He thinks that they should be involved less politically in the community.
Well, I mean, our position, Black West, me and Damon, we've been critical. You know, you go to the churches and you hear them cite Martin Luther King and the things that he did and in the spirit of Martin Luther King. But when you do that, you have to understand Martin Luther King, you know, was involved in the protest, was involved in the hoping to change legislation. A lot of pastors won't speak up because they get money from the county for their daycare centers.
Yeah, that's what he mentioned.
You know, you don't want to lose that, or you get contracts to build buildings, and you don't want to lose that. And, you know, back in Martin Luther King's day, and all of these civil rights things, they met in the churches. Their planning was in the churches. You know, that was one of the places to get the people together and educate the people. And they often was outspoken. And I don't think all of the clergy is outspoken as they can be. And we've been always critical of that. And again, you know, some of them, like I said, it's the daycare programs or whatever that is that they get money. Some of them is jobs. There's a couple of black clergy work for the county now.
Well, we just got one, but the one that works for the city, I think, is it Sproul, who now works for the city?
Well, him and the pastor of Macedonia, Reverend Darren Morton.
Oh, that's it. Yes, Dan Moore.
He's been the recreation commissioner for the longest. But Sproul's from I forget the name of the church. He is head over the water department. I think Andre Wallace brought him in, and Sean Patterson Howard kept him. And supposedly, from what I'm hearing, good things, that he is getting that department in shape.
Yeah, I heard he's a good administrator, but so much for the separation of church and state, huh? Hey, listen, before you go, something that I want to do, and I wanted to get your report this week, but I'm going to create a segment in the next couple of weeks, and I'd like to invite you to be a part of, and I knew you would be. We need to open up the dialogue between folks, white folks, black folks, the far left, etc., and have honest conversations about race. I'm becoming more increasingly concerned about the attitudes of people, and I'm sure you do too.
I would absolutely jump at an opportunity to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, and we'll make it an hour segment, and we'll find a spot, and we'll have some real honest talk about this, and we'll talk about a format for it off air. I just wanted to invite you to do that.
I've been encouraging groups of people. What you know, Donald Trump said, make America great. What made this country great was our differences and our coming together, and you know, our different beliefs, our different ideas. And once you have conversation with people, you know, you get to understand them a little bit better and know how they think and how they operate. And you still don't always have to agree, but you will have a better understanding, and with better understanding, hopefully, more respect for our differences.
Oh, well, I think that's the biggest thing. But if people who do what you and I do, you know, hopefully we can set an example to disagree. Like, I hate you right down to my toenails, but I still have you on the show every week. Listen, thank you very much. A.J. Woodson, editor-in-chief of Black Westchester magazine. He does the heavy lifting and the investigative reporting that's so needed in Mount Vernon. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
All right, take care. And coming up next, he doesn't know he's on TV, but he will be in a moment. When I remove the mask from the camera, we have City Councilman Ivar Hayden with us this morning. We're going to talk with him next, but first a look at the weather and more. All right, it's warming up. It's warming up, 27 degrees. My goodness, it's a heat wave. Going to get up to maybe 30 today. And that's about all she's going to... No, I'm sorry. It's going to get up to 40. I read the wrong sheet. It's going to get up to 40 today. Lots of sunshine. The wind out of the northwest, 5 to 10 miles an hour. Tonight, a few clouds. Temperature 22. Thursday, a mixture of sun and clouds. Temperature 44. The wind out of the southwest, 5 to 10. And on Friday, mostly cloudy. A heat wave, 45 degrees. The overnight low low 33. The weather once again is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And this bottom of the hour has been brought to you by Aging Issues Management and their partner, Aging Issues Radio. They'll be with us tonight at 6 o'clock for another of their broadcasts. You'll want to listen in if you're preparing for retirement or even trying to figure out how you're moving on with your life as those days and years approach. The law firm of Pena and Con, Dominic's Fine Cigars, and we will be doing our show live there on the Friday before the Super Bowl. Dominic's Fine Cigars, licensed retailer with a big selection, including Arturo Fuente, Patrons, and more. Dominic's Fine Cigars, located on Boston Post Road in Larchmont, and plug-in virtual reality. And so, now we don't jump away from your screens, but here he is. Please welcome, you can see yourself right up there if you want to, if you're happy with you. All right. Our guest, Ivar Hyde. I had to learn all this stuff.
Oh, that looks lovely.
Anyway, Ivar Hayden, District 4, New Rochelle. We understand that you all had an interesting meeting the other day with all the new council people and new ideas. And then there was, I guess, the library there was a meeting at the library. And one of the chief issues that came out of it was concern. Some people wanting a moratorium, some people concerned about the historic effect of development in terms. What was your take on all that? And is there a difference, is there not, between, hey, let's take a breath and look back versus officially a moratorium?
Oh,
Contractually,
yeah, absolutely.
You could do that, right?
I really am not in favor of simply stopping development at this point. But I do think that it is, as I've said many times, time to think about what we've done, what we've accomplished, where we want to go. And there are real issues that I think the councils should sit around the table and debate. I think that's appropriate, and I think the public is demanding that, and I think they're right to demand that. So, it's appropriate to do that.
Okay, but how do you see it taking shape?
I'm not really sure. I'm waiting to see what development sends our way. To date, I have not seen anything from the development department officially in terms of what they would like to do in about reopening the zones, since we're maxed out in all of the different overlay zones. Waiting for that and see where they want to go. I've certainly had several conversations internally with not only staff, but with the new council members, and I think that's very encouraging. We've had our first 2 council meetings now with the new council members, and I think it's terrific. I think it's really interesting and exciting, and we can have fresh ideas and new people, and I'm looking forward to that going forward. I will have to see what actually comes down the pike, and once the development department gives us their look for what they want to see, then we will be able to react to that and formulate a plan.
Now, you mentioned that the overlay zone is maxed out. Does that mean that the various sites, that there are no other sites in that zone, or there's nothing new proposed for that zone?
No, there are plenty of sites still available. The issue is each overlay zone has a maximum number of residential units, among other things. It also has commercial and other things built into it. But all of the residential units have been used up in all of the different overlay zones. At the end of last year, we actually moved some around from different zones in order to accommodate projects that were already in work and had been brought before the planning board to make sure that those could happen. But now we have used up all of those. So now is the opportunity for the city council to look at the future.
Well, there was a piece this morning in the paper that you see me now looking for in the state of real estate, and they talked about, this was in Lohud today, how developers have placed their bets on riverside development and on transit-oriented development.
Yeah.
And they don't really see it abating. They think that way will continue.
We have people lined up in New Rochelle who were looking for the zones to be reopened. There are developers already lined up looking to build. We have, I think, currently 31 proposed projects in work.
Wow.
How many of those will actually come to fruition, however, is a real question. Some of these have been on hold for a while. We want to make sure that people who committed to these projects, who actually have used up some of the units in the zones, are actually building, which is another thing. They have a 2-year time frame to actually get a shovel in the ground, and I want to see where that's going as well. So,
How many are actually either up now or in the with shovels?
well, there
in
aren't that
ground?
many. I mean, that's the reality. Also, when people get very scared when they hear 31 projects, but this is spaced over an extended period of time. So already we've seen that. Right now, well, let's say I don't know off the top of my head, but there are 2 buildings on Burling Lane that are recently one just completed, one that will be completed soon.
They've already got all
The
that
print
workout
house,
equipment, the
yep.
studio they call it.
Well, they still don't have the Con Ed hookup.
Oh, okay. Well,
which
that would
is
help.
kind of amazing, yeah. Print House is now renting. The Loews building is renting. They finally started construction on the 2 Church Division towers. So those are underway, as are at least one of the buildings on the corner of Center and Huguenot is also in process right now.
Well, I saw all the work now finally started and getting real earnest. The Church Division lot.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's-
Church
yeah,
Division
that's-
is
yeah,
finally under
that's- yeah,
construction.
that's good to see.
Yep, the North Avenue
What an
projects.
ugly building that was. Just taking that down was a boon to mankind.
Huge difference.
I saw.
Huge difference. Bob Young's project on North Avenue is well underway. That should also be opening relatively soon, the first phase of that. And we have the Capelli building, the Standard, which is also just about complete and ready to rent. But for now, those are the ones, and we're looking at others down the road. But we'll see.
Any sense of how much? I noticed that the building, it amazes me. The Loews building already has people living in it.
Oh yeah, there
What-
I
the
think
ra-
70 units already rented in that
Already,
building.
that's
Yeah.
incredible to me. And
Well, there's such a huge demand.
it really is.
Of
huh?
young professionals from the city, but also, from the surrounding lower Westchester area, who want the transit-oriented development. There's no question about that. That is critical.
And
these are not inexpensive by any stretch of the
I know,
imagination.
and there are people who want to downsize, who don't want to
Yes.
take care of a home anymore. They're
Yep.
moving into these buildings.
There's
as
an
well.
aging
Is that correct?
population in New Rochelle. There's no question about that. The single-family homes are being sold off by, my generation, let's
Yeah.
say, and as we did, as my wife and I did. It was really don't need a house
No, you-
for 2 people,
or all that work
but we want to
anymore,
stay
yeah.
in New Rochelle, obviously because of my connections to council, but also Diane has connections to a very large extended family that are mostly still here in this area. So I think a lot of people are also interested in doing that, no question.
My guest is Ivar Hayden, City Councilman from District 4, now starting your third term?
Third term.
Third term. Boy,
third
time
term.
flies
Yeah,
when
so-
you're having fun.
It certainly does.
Last time you were here inspired me to, I drive through town a lot anyway, but I drove to a lot of the retail spots and up and down some streets. And I share your concern about retail stores closing because they're worried that they're going to be building over their heads anyway. They got to get out of there, but they haven't moved. Some have moved. You'll see signs that say we're now over here in this street, we're here in that street. Is that trend continuing? Or we
Yeah.
have more and more people moving out? Is that,
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's true. I think the construction and traffic issues and all of that certainly have hurt retail, but also I think it's sign of the times. The internet has made a huge difference. We don't have sufficient residential density at this point to support local mom and pops. It simply isn't there, and that's one of the things that we're hoping to build. One encouraging thing, I met with a couple of developers last week about prospective projects, and one thing that's interesting is for the very first time they were talking about office space.
Really?
Yeah, and I noticed there was an article recently in one of the business magazines about how Westchester office is finally starting to catch up. So
It
I
sort of
think
makes sense
it's-
because if you've got the young professionals coming here, the classic talent pool will be here.
Exactly, and that's what these people were talking about, and it was, I thought, very encouraging. I mean, building this kind of a vertical, vertical structure that we're used to in the corporate world, but where you have people that are living, working, entertaining themselves, right, and buying products and services within the same building, basically, which is, I think, a very contemporary concept.
No.
I think this is where this kind of stuff is going to go.
It does seem so. Now, one of the things I've heard, while certainly, in fact, talking about Burling Lane is one example, to see on the first floor gyms and et cetera, I think in that case, they put that there because that's one of the ways they want to lure tenants as well. But I've heard that some of the cases, that's a default because they can't get retail.
Well, Burling Lane never had that on that block. It is not required to have retail.
But what about
on
some of the other
zoning.
spaces? What are they doing? Are they just going empty
they are
now?
primarily looking at restaurants, which is still the big.
That's still a good thing.
The big thing, yep. And then smaller service businesses, hair salons, nail salons. I think co-working spaces are also something that are interesting. I mean, it's been tried a couple of times. A lot of these, a lot of these larger buildings like the Loews Towers do have community space already built into the buildings that could be used for co-working.
Okay.
In other words, there are community spaces that you can have it, sit down there and with your computer and do work and that kind of thing. So, and even a cafe. The cafe is built into these things as well as the gym facilities.
We need a good. And I'm not asking government to do this. I'm always telling people that it's a free enterprise. I'm surprised we don't have a really good Asian or Chinese restaurant here in town. I'm just shocked that
we don't have a French restaurant either.
I don't care.
I like French.
That's just no. I know.
French
I just
food
did
is
that.
excellent. No, you're right. I mean, we
All
don't.
that butter at our
there's a
ages. We can't be
whole-
eating butter at our ages.
Well, butter, I don't think is bad for you.
Are you kidding me? Your blood cells go one at a time through your arteries when you eat a lot of butter.
Cardiologists
they
have-
queue up,
Cardiologists have always
no.
told me that it's cooked oils that are the worst for you. Actually,
Well, and you
which
never
is
know.
why
Remember
there's
for
this
years I
whole
didn't eat
trend
eggs.
for olive oil. Remember,
For
the
years-
olive oil is healthier.
Yeah,
but
remember for years none of us ate eggs. And now they say, eggs
Yeah,
are
I know,
fine.
yeah.
Who the hell knew?
Hey.
Don't eat beef, eat beef. Don't eat chicken, eat chicken. My goodness.
I think we could moderate
Everything
that
in
we eat.
moderation.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
So how do you
Yeah.
like being on TV? You like this? See, now we
I
have
think
the
this is
split
cool.
screen.
I can't really see
Yeah, so now
what I
everybody
look
can-
like, but I guess
Well-
I have to dress a little fancier
No,
now.
you
don't
can't
I?
tell. No, because
can't
it's
tell?
they can
No,
see.
I
that
think
you're-
this is great. I really do.
Yeah,
I
we're
think it's
moving
wonderful.
along. Okay, what do you want to shout out about? What's going on in your district?
Well, I'm encouraged, as I said, by the new members of council. I think it's going to be
Sarah Kay, I understand, spoke,
Sarah-
made national news.
Give her a break. Come on.
I'm just having fun with her.
No, she did.
I'm
going
gonna
to
seduce
She
her to
did
come
speak.
on here.
I think she'll
Yeah, she'll be
eventually-
fine, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she needs to get to know you a little bit.
No,
I
but
think,
it'll be laughs when she finally comes on. I'm
but
building up the tension. You see.
These are three very, very smart women, and I think that's
Well, Miss Herbert, I know
that's
well.
a very encouraging start. Because I find it always, you might disagree on some issues, but basically, if you're dealing with smart people who do care, and they do about the city, all three of them, I think it's positive.
That's
and
great.
I like having, as I say, new discussions, fresh ideas. They're not locked into what we created over the last 8 years or so.
Well, that's
So,
always good. Fresh
yeah, and
minds,
I-
fresh blood,
I think it's excellent.
quiet people. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, I don't
Now-
think it's going to be quiet for
No,
long.
I know.
really don't.
I do know. Some of them I know
Yeah.
pretty well. And actually, Miss Kay, I get along with when I've met her. I just have a lot of fun with it. See, it builds up. You realize when she comes on, all the listeners we're going to have. In fact, it'll make her twice as nervous that she will come on.
I think that's a good point.
I
I think
got-
you should have all these people.
Yeah,
on,
and we will.
Yeah.
I had one more question for you. I know it came up. I guess it came out of the meeting with the library where people came in to meet y'all, and that is the suggestion that someone from the city council be somehow involved in the school committee or the school board. I can't remember exactly what was specifically proposed. What was that, and what do you think of it?
I think it'd be a great idea for both ways.
Mm-hmm.
There should definitely be more contact and cooperation between the city council and the school board.
Mm-hmm.
I always found that kind of amazing on my first couple of terms on council. Hardly ever was I involved in any way. No one from the school board, except in recent months, no one from the school board ever reached out to me about issues that were shared issues. Development being the biggest one.
Huge, sure.
And the amount of children generated, and it was pulling teeth 4 years ago to get the school board to come to meetings at City Hall to work out these formulas. The school superintendent at the time, seemed totally disinterested, and yet these were critically important issues. And it took several meetings and 9 months before the school board would finally sit down at the table with us and discuss these very important issues.
And was this after all the crises that took place?
No, this was actually before that.
Well, that's
that was before that. But it was a mindset, and there was total disconnect. I have to say that in recent months, I have had much more access to people on the school board. First of all, I know a couple of them personally now, which I didn't have those personal relationships in the past, and that's a good thing. And I do think that we need more of that. I think we need to have somebody from council attend school board meetings from time to time, and vice versa. We do this on the IDA board. You know, the IDA, even though it isn't a formal legal requirement, has one person from the city council and one person from the school board on the IDA board, and I think it's very appropriate because we have to deal with issues all the time on the IDA that are obviously relevant to the city, but also to the school board. So I think more communication is really critical. We need to be able to do that, and I think there's been more discussion about that. I don't know how it would work. But I do think that we definitely need to have some kind of grown-up discussions between the council and the school board from time to time. You know, even in a private basis. I mean, it's got to happen because there's too much that we share.
And for a while, it was supposed to be apolitical, ergo you weren't involved. But then, as we learned after the Valerie Schwab murder, that it is everybody's business.
It is.
And
there's no question about that.
Anything else you want to shout out about before we send you on your way?
Not really. I'm delighted the sun is out today, even though it's a little cold. I want to keep working going forward on these development issues, which I think are critical to the success of the city. And I think we've started very well. And now we have to fine-tune everything, and I think that's the appropriate thing for us to be working on for the next few months.
Okay, Ivar Hayden, District 4, City Councilman. Stay. I had an item to ask you about after class, but we've got to sign off right now. I'm Bob Marrone for Jake Schaefer. It is 9:10, and we're going to take our leave early today for business purposes. You've been listening to Mornings with Bob Marrone here on Radio Westchester. We are the radio station at the train station. Thank you so much for listening. One last update on the weather. It's 26 degrees, going to get up to maybe 30 today. No, I lie. I keep saying that. Maybe 40 degrees, but you'll have sunshine all day. It's going to be a little chilly tonight, though, getting down in the mid-20s. I'm Bob Marrone. Thank you so much for listening.